Monday, April 12th, the meeting of Lacombe City Council regular meeting. It's 5 p.m. and I will call it to order. We've got an agenda before you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Recognizing that we've recently seen a rollback of public health measures, more specifically a return to no indoor dine-in service at restaurants, pubs, bars, lounges and cafes, I would respectfully ask that Council would add an item of outdoor dining to the agenda as an emergent issue, as I believe the City has the ability to make a positive impact to support local businesses. I believe this is a time-sensitive issue that needs to be addressed immediately, that waiting until the next meeting of Council may potentially have detrimental impacts on local business, and therefore meets the definition of emergent in our procedural bylaw 370. Therefore, I move that Council add indoor dining to this evening's agenda as an item under section 5.
Very good. Then that would be item 5.7 should it to go through. Is that one we have to consider adding to the agenda first, or just by show of hands prior to previous?
So the way your procedural bylaw reads is that actually you only have to vote on it if there is any expressed dissent from adding that, in which case it is a simple majority vote to add it. But if everyone consents, if there's no expressions of dissent, then it can just be added in there.
Very good. Is there anyone that does not feel that's in our best interest to consider this time? Very good. Then we will amend the current agenda to include item 5.7 patio.
Can I then go ahead and move that we adopt the agenda as amended?
You certainly can. Thank you. Is there anything else from anyone? Very good. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. So we've got a fairly lengthy agenda this evening, so we're going to get right into presentations. And we've got 3 individuals here, qualified individuals to present to us from the FCSS perspective for the social master plan. Alyssa Dinter is the board chair, and Michelle Meyer, board member, and of course Susan McDonald, the executive director there. Who is going to lead the presentation?
Alyssa's going to lead and introduce us, and then I'll take it from there.
Very good. Thank you very much, Michelle. Alyssa, welcome. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much for the invitation to come and discuss the City of Lacombe's Social Master Plan with Council tonight. My name is Alyssa Dinter, and I am the board chair for the FCSS organization. And I have been on the board for just about 3 years now, and my background is project management with the public sector. So I'll ask Michelle to introduce herself, and then we'll roll through the presentation.
Thank you. So I am Michelle Meyer. This is my first year on the board. I joined this fall, and plan on staying for my long 6 years. I have an HR and a teaching background. So I grew up in Lacombe. I've taught in Lacombe, and I work in Red Deer doing student recruitment in HR, and have strong community ties to a lot of Lacombe. My kids growing up here, and this is where we've chose to raise our family. So very committed to working toward making sure that Lacombe is a family place and a good community to grow up in. So Ross, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk about why we're here, and why we wanted to have this conversation with council. So we were really pleased. Thank you. We were really pleased to see the social master plan as a priority for the City of Lacombe. As a result of that, FCSS had actually decided to extend our next strategic plan to align with what was anticipated to come out of the city social master plan. So there's a few reasons why we're here tonight. One is that we 100% support the social master plan. We support the completion of a well-rounded, all-encompassing social master plan. FCSS in phase 1 was heavily involved, and so it was very much research focused on community agencies. We know that phase 2 would have had a wider reach out into the community, and it would have informed the city with broader community feedback. It would have allowed for surveys, focus groups, engagement initiatives, etc. We broke our presentation tonight into two pieces. So there were conversations that the board had, as well as our executive director, Susan McDonald, with FCSS staff. We talked about what the value of a social master plan would be, and we also talked about what our vision for the social master plan would look like. So we feel that phase 2 is vitally important to the community. It's why we're here tonight. We see the value of moving forward with it, and we're hoping the ultimate outcome is that City Council reconsiders proceeding with phase 2. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So we broke our presentation, or the value piece of it, into 3 pillars or 3 themes. The first one being social needs in the community, the second one being stakeholder consultation, and the third related to fiscal restraint, judicial use of funds. So I'll talk about the social needs piece of things. At this time, we believe Lacombe doesn't have a clear understanding of what the needs in our community are that are being met and what needs are not being met. So we do know that we have an economic and recreation plan, but it doesn't go into the detail that a social master plan would go, in terms of understanding really how our community wants to live together, how we can support our neighbors, how our social needs are actually being met or unmet. We realize that while COVID may be a temporary way of being for our community, we understand the struggles with COVID. We know that it'll also have long-term impacts on our social fabric of our community. We know that it has and will continue to bring complex social needs that we need to have a better understanding of, so that we can address them and help families, businesses, individuals move forward in our community. We'll continue to see the impacts of COVID in our community for years to come. So while we're all hopeful of what this year looks like in terms of COVID and our safety and being able to gather again, we do understand that there are long-term impacts with this that'll affect our community. We don't believe we can determine if social needs are actually being met without a comprehensive social master plan. After that initial consultation, community agencies being contacted, we need to do that deeper analysis. We need to really dig deep into the community. And this is where we think phase 2 has the most value. It goes beyond that typical consultation and goes into the community on a more broad level to assess needs. It'll help direct the social needs effort. So we have a lot of great projects, great ideas in the community, but we don't have confirmation that they're actually addressing the root causes and the social needs in our community. So we think that there's value in being able to direct all of these wonderful efforts coming from volunteers and agencies within the city. This will help streamline some of those programs and make sure we're not sort of missing the mark on what people need within our community. We think it'll help set our community social needs up for success. It'll ensure we have a community that we and future generations are proud to live in. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. And that takes us into the second pillar of what FCSS sees as the value of a social master plan, which is surrounding stakeholder consultation. So FCSS is really proud to be a key partner with a lot of organizations or interagencies within the Central Alberta area. FCSS does hold monthly meetings with those organizations in the area, and the outcome of those meetings is to share information and find connections between those agencies and partners. In 2020, FCSS saw 71 unique community organizations presented through those monthly meetings. This is a large number of organizations for our area and demonstrates the enhanced need to ensure that we do have alignment with each organization to ensure that we're preventing overlap, duplication, and promoting efficiency. It's through those strong networks that we have with those interagency partners that we know that many other agencies were also planning to utilize and leverage the social master plan to help with the development of their own organization's strategic plans. It helps to create opportunities to collaborate and align with the overarching vision and goal of the City of Lacombe to address the social needs of our community. And as Michelle mentioned, this does include FCSS, where we have delayed the development of our next 3-year strategic plan. We do intend to be starting the development of that next plan for the 2022 to 2025 plan this fall. In the absence of having the evidence information from phase 2 of the social master plan, it will be increasingly difficult and challenging to determine FCSS's future strategic direction to ensure that the social needs within our community are best met. Through our stakeholder consultation and ongoing networks that we do have, we have identified some key examples of community partners and projects that we think demonstrate the value that a social master plan would bring to our community. For example, the Lacombe Library is looking to complete a community needs assessment. They do regularly conduct this community needs assessment that is then requested and used by many other organizations to inform some of their planning. We do see this as more as a grassroots effort within our community, and at this time is not connected to a broader city plan with a clear line of sight to social needs. We know that there are discussions underway to determine transportation needs in the city. Based on recent discussions with FCSS and Connects, City Council and Uber, we do see that there may be need to do a transportation survey of residents, again, talking about what are the social needs of the community and how does transportation enable those individuals to be connected within their community. The primary care network does need information to address Lacombe as a dementia-friendly community, and there is work underway for the City of Lacombe's affordable housing strategy. So through those examples that we have highlighted, it does show that there's a common thread in all of those different examples and work that's underway in our community. The root of that being really, what are the social needs of our community? These examples demonstrate that social needs are trying to be addressed on a micro scale in the community and on an ad hoc basis, rather than taking a strategic, purposeful, and outcomes-focused analysis of the full social needs within our community. Through this fragmented approach, we're unable to focus our collective energy to address complex needs and ensure there are no duplications in some areas and where we may be having gaps in other areas in our community. Again, that social master plan really would help to truly understand the needs in our community, the root causes, and develop cohesive and aligned strategies to address them. Moving to the next slide, please. We talk about fiscal restraint and judicial use of funds as the last pillar of the value that we see for a social master plan. So as we all know, we are in times of fiscal restraint, not only in our community, in our province, nationally, as well as globally. It's times like this where it's more critical than ever that we have a hard look at our community needs, how to be more efficient with our service delivery, and ensure that the funds that are available to us within our community are directed to the greatest needs. As you saw from the previous theme, FCSS works with many organizations. We see no shortage of requests for great programs, ideas, and initiatives within our community, and asking FCSS if there are similar programs that exist and trying to see if there's already duplication within the organization. Right now, it is hard to assess the value of those programs, ideas, and initiatives and whether they truly are addressing the root cause issues and social gaps. As a result, we feel we are mainly using subjective analysis and feedback from our networks to inform those discussions. A targeted social master plan that is informed by extensive community consultation that would happen in phase 2 would help to provide the evidence that we need to make informed decisions on our community programs, ensure root cause issues and social gaps are addressed, and provide strategic direction to all of the organizations. So ultimately, we do feel that the social master plan phase 2 will help to give guidance and direction to all of our organizations to make sure that our limited funds are used to target the greatest needs, reduce the amount of duplication and overlap, and ensure that we are really taking a business-minded focus to addressing the social needs in our community. I'll turn it back to Michelle for the next slide.
Okay, so now that we've shared with you what we believe to be the value of continuing with the social master plan, we wanted to share what we believed our vision, or what FCSS staff and the board came together as our vision for the social master plan. So we believe that this is a critical opportunity for the city. It gives you the opportunity to take the information that you've received from phase 1 and play a role in the creation of a plan that is informed by broad consultation beyond traditional community groups. So taking that step into phase 2. It gives an opportunity to build strategies for the community that provide a clear vision that addresses gaps and align services. It also gives the opportunity to create buy-in from the community. The community would have an active role in developing and shaping this plan, which we think is incredibly important moving forward as a community. It gives the opportunity to set our community up for success for generations to come, community for families and individuals to grow in. And it gives the opportunity to connect each and every member of our community. Really, our ultimate goal here is to ensure that we feel supported, welcomed, and included, regardless of whether you're a family or an individual, that a citizen of Lacombe feels this way. And the social master plan is meant to bring all of us together and make sure that we're able to assess the needs and meet the needs of everyone in the community. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we just want to take this time, Melissa and I and Susan, to thank you for allowing us, inviting us to attend City Council. We wanted to advocate for proceeding with phase 2. We wanted to take the opportunity to outline the value that we see in moving forward with the social master plan. And you can see the words on the screen, the word cloud. This sort of encapsulates our vision and gives you an opportunity to see the main reasons why we think this could work. This is how we imagine this to enhance our community and move forward with it. So at this time, we'd invite any questions. We want to say thank you again, and we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for coming to present to us. We appreciate it. As you know, council did deliberate, discuss and deliberate over this very item fairly recently, and I was just wondering, is there any specific points out of that conversation, which I'm fully expecting that you watched, that you feel were unfairly represented?
Susan McDonald here.
Sure.
I guess, so the question as far as council, I guess our concern was that at this point it's just taken as information and there was no plan or time frame to move forward with phase 2. So at this time we were looking for future direction, or hopefully to be able to complete phase 2 by the end of this year. So just looking for if there's the will of council and city administration to move forward and proceed with phase 2.
Okay.
And I think to build on that, maybe a little bit as well, and follow up to some of the previous council conversations in regards to not proceeding with phase 2. I think, so my understanding is some of the reticence or challenges with it is that wasn't feeling we were necessarily getting the value out of phase 1, or phase 1 may not have met sort of the expectations of what we were looking for from a master plan. And I think really just reinforcing that we saw phase 1 as sort of that introductory level setting opportunity to engage with our current community organizations, and that, really to go back to what the original intention of phase 2 was supposed to be, which is that broader communication, broader consultation, try to get away from some of those, or explore further, I think, some of those deeper, not as traditional routes of feedback to ensure we really do hear from all residents. So I think just really wanting to bring it back to council to, encourage a rethink of proceeding with phase 2 there as well.
Okay, thank you. Just so you're aware, I didn't really intend this for it to be too much of a back and forth as it is a presentation today. However, it was the thoughts of council at that time that this was a rather troubling time to be embarking on this type of a report, and we didn't feel that the report was necessarily going to be an accurate reflection of our current situation given that we are in the midst of a pandemic. So that's the reason why we chose to put it on the back burner for a period of time. It wasn't like it was totally done away with, but it was certainly postponed. So just so everyone is on the same page, I think that's just a very high level summary of why. There were other reasons, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So obviously we're aware of the previous decision and so forth, but I guess more question for CEO Gowdy. What are the options? Phase 1 was already completed at the city's responsibility. I guess is phase 2 an option, if so desired by council, that it would be then turned over to the responsibility of FCSS? Or is that what are our options to keep this process moving forward? If
Sure. So if you went to your public participation policy, there are options for delegating the completion or the leadership of specific tasks, of course, with that agency's agreement. You certainly have the ability to delegate resources and authority on behalf of the city to undertake that task. Right now, the spring adjustments are being prepared or have been prepared largely with that removal that council had directed from the project. And so you'd have to look at refunding it if you're resourcing, if you're sending the resources along with that responsibility to FCSS. And again, that's all with the blessing of FCSS, that they are interested in taking on that responsibility with the resources, which we haven't asked them.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess thank you very much to all of you ladies who I all know. I was one who did speak out quite critically of the first phase, because I think that, well, not I think, I know it's because I do value this kind of plan very highly. And I was disappointed with the quality of the first phase. Yesterday, I spent my Sunday reading social master plans, and there's a good load of them on the internet. And virtually all of them refer to residents first. They refer to, they're indebted to the input of the people of the community. And I think that is the piece that I found. I know it was phase 1, but I still think there should have been some attempt to get the flavor, get the opinion, get the involvement of residents first. And that, I just felt I did not see Lacombe in that first phase. I'm also biased because I work with a lot of social services agencies. I knew how much they were doing in the months of November and December, and they weren't connecting with a lot of their clients at that time. And I thought, so that's going to be the measuring stick of our community. It just really concerned me that the timing was off. So as I sat here now, I looked at my notes from January 11th, and my 2 concerns was the timing is off, and secondly, I felt it was a poorly written report. But that does not say that I don't value this plan. I was very pointed with saying, how do we not lose sight of this priority of this council? And unfortunately, this landed in the year of an election. And so we can't tell the next council that this should be a priority. So I hear what you're saying, your concern about timing. I also appreciate what Councillor Ross is saying, that maybe we could look at a different way of carrying on with developing this social master plan. But how are we going to engage with residents at this time when we can't? I mean, by Zoom is good, but when you're looking at a social master plan, you really need to feel what you're doing, and you need to connect with people. And I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to do that. So we're not going to get the buy-in from our community. So that's where my bias is. I value this very much, so I value your presentation, but I just wanted to feed back though a little bit about the questions that they did use in phase 1. And so question 1, question 2, they talk about Lacombe as a very spiritually faith-based community. Churches are really prominent here, but yet there were no churches in the stakeholders. So that would be my comment right away. No residents in the stakeholders. Then in the comment, question number 7, what did the stakeholders want? What advice did they have for the city? Number 1, it says the city needs to be in tune with what residents actually need and want, not what they believe residents need and want. So I believe this phase 1 is telling residents what their 11 focus areas are, or was it 11? And that concerns me. We really needed residents right at the beginning so that they could have buy-in to those focus areas. So that was my misgivings about this report. Do I think it had, we still have it though. We still have those focus areas, but I just really encourage whatever our go forward plan is, that our next step is for sure to connect with residents, and that they feel that when the final report comes out or the final plan comes out, that they can own it. So there, thank you for giving me like 10 minutes there.
Thank you.
I really like St. Albert's plan, by the way.
I do too. But Cora, or Councillor Hoopster, I certainly agree with you that the piece missing is the feedback from residents, and we feel strongly that if we were to proceed with phase 2, that we would get that. So by pulling it all together, then at the end we come up with some strategies that come from input from residents, as well as all the community groups and support that we have within the community. So yes, that piece is missing, but then I think when the RFP was written for it, I think that was to be included in phase 2. So hopefully we can still capture that and come up with a good social master plan.
Sure, and let Mayor Herron know that they got an honorable mention for their master plan. Anyone else have questions for our presenters? Well,
sorry, more of a question. No, thank you. Sorry, more of a question for moving forward. So are we accepting this only as information, or can there be motion for administration to move forward with the relationship with FCSS? Is what could options of moving forward with the stage 2 funding, or what the vision would entail for more specific as to complete stage 2? Because right now, obviously there's X amount of dollars that was originally set aside, and obviously there's public engagement. Can the stakeholders that deliver the services represent public appropriately? Probably not. And how do we engage with the public effectively to get that input to address that concern? So we're going to get value out of stage 2. So is it proper to make a motion for administration to continue to have more of a plan moving forward of how that funds would be utilized? Like, would it be an outside consultant, or would it be FCSS solely having the authority to complete stage 2?
So each councillor has the ability to make whatever motions that they choose.
Okay, no, I just don't suppose proper for them.
I think that would be premature of us to make a motion in that regard, in my opinion, simply because of the discussions that we've had in the past, and we've let it sit the way that it did for many reasons. And I think that there's a lot of items to be addressed before we can move forward in a direction that is befitting of our community, for a lot of the reasons that were said tonight and many that were at our last meeting. So I will leave it there. And if anybody chooses to make a motion, they're certainly free to do so. Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it. And the next item that we have before us is a public hearing over land use bylaw 400.33, the Hearthstone R3 rezoning. Legislator Pettibone, I've got here before us, I've got Mr. Teal's name down. Was there some information that we wanted to start with, or can I go ahead and begin opening the public hearing?
Please proceed, Mayor Creasy.
Thank you. So I declare the statutory public hearing for bylaw 400.33 now open, and that this hearing is held pursuant to sections 7, 8, 230, 692, and 606, section 2C of the Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, chapter M26, and request the legislative coordinator to confirm the purpose of this public hearing, that this statutory public hearing notice was advertised, and that any written submissions received and not included in the public hearing agenda package are read into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the general public to provide input and express their views on advertising, land use bylaw 400.33, given first reading February 22nd. Bylaw 400.33 proposes to amend the R3 residential modular home district to add detached dwellings on any parcel within Plan 782-2856, Plan 882-2953, and any future parcel created from land in either of the foregoing plans as a permitted use. Public hearing notice was advertised as shown on page 31 of the agenda on our city website for the required duration per the MGA and the advertising bylaw respectively, which is at least 5 days before April 12th and posted to the website at least 14 days prior to April 12th. And also advertised in the Lacombe Express on April 1st and on April 8th. And to my knowledge, there's no written submissions were received. I would just ask Mr. Teal to confirm that no late submissions came in.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, members of council. I can confirm that I have not received any additional late submissions related to this matter.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Coordinator Pettibone. I'm assuming that the second portion, even though there is no one to speak, according to the MGA, I still need to go through the second portion of the opening.
Yes, please. It's according to your procedural bylaw.
Yep, very good.
We haven't received, incidentally, any submissions for the next public hearing either. So,
very good. Thank you both. All persons giving oral presentations are to clearly state their name, and presentations are to be brief and to the point. By the looks of this evening, they will be very brief. The order of the statutory public hearing presentations will be the development officer designate, those in favor, those opposed, and followed by those deemed to be affected by this decision and wish to be heard. Once again, just for confirmation, we have no written submissions.
No, I received none.
Very good, and we have no one waiting in the queue to join us electronically, I'm assuming?
We do not.
Very good. Pretty tough for members of council to ask any questions if there's no submission. So being there is, I will ask one more time, does the development officer have any additional information?
Your worship, or Mayor Creasy, I have no additional information that's not presented in the RFT to council. I will point out that in addition to the required advertisement that Mr. Pettibone has gone over, we did host an additional public input opportunity as part of this bylaw. That took the form of a Teams meeting that landowners and affected landowners could join myself as a member of city staff back on March 18th to ask questions about the bylaw and provide their feedback. 5 individuals to join us, and the feedback that we obtained through that process is contained towards the back part of the RFD attached to this item.
Thank you for that information. We appreciate it. So those in favor, there are none to speak. Those opposed, there are none to speak. And those deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard, there are no submissions there as well. So I will declare that the hearing for bylaw 400.33 is now closed at 5:36 p.m. And I'm assuming that we're going to move right into bylaw 487, which is the Len Thompson paving bylaw. And I understand that Manager Mitchell is here with us.
That's correct, Mayor Creasy, I am here.
Very good. The floor is yours if you'd like to open.
Sure, does Legislative Coordinator Pettibone need to give his 2 cents?
Sure, I would just ask Mayor Creasy to open this public hearing for bylaw 487.
Here I thought I was being so sneaky, giving that I didn't have a sheet. And I was looking for it furiously while I went through these, but I will improvise here, and if I mess up, please interject.
It's the same. Mayor Creasy, sorry.
I'll just put in 487 in place, which is not a problem.
It's on the bottom of the first page there that you used previously. The first legal page. Yeah.
So it is. If I don't open my eyes and look at the last word, what it was, absolutely. So I declare the statutory public hearing for bylaw 487 now open, and that the hearing is held pursuant to sections 7, 8, 405, and 606, sections 2C of the MGA, RSA 2000, chapter M26, in accordance with the City of Lacombe local improvement tax policy. I now request the legislative coordinator to confirm the purpose of the public hearing, that the public hearing notice was advertised properly, and that any written submissions received and not included in the public hearing agenda package are read into the record. Coordinator Pettibone.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. This purpose of this public hearing is to allow the general public to provide input and express their views on local improvement tax bylaw 487. Bylaw 47 proposes to authorize administration to levy a local improvement tax of 15% of the total project cost to pave Len Thompson Drive and 55th Avenue, with 85% funded by the city. Public hearing notice was advertised, as shown on page 33 of the agenda, on our city website for the required duration, at least 5 days before April 12th, and posted to the website at least 14 days prior to April 12th, per the MGA and the advertising bylaw respectively, and also advertised in the Lacombe Express on April 1st. Mayor Creasy and Council, I can confirm no written submissions were received. I believe Manager Mitchell can comment further.
Thank you, Legislative Coordinator Pettibone and Mayor Creasy. As Council may recall, this local improvement was originally proposed as a 70-30 split, with impacted property owners paying 30% of the project costs. When administration solicited feedback from the impacted property owners on the plan, 73% of the owners, based on property frontage, were opposed to the project, 3% were in favor, and 24% had no comment. Based on this feedback that was received, Council reduced the property owner's contribution to the 15% as is shown in the current bylaw, with the city now paying the remaining 85%. We also confirmed that the local improvement tax would not exceed the project estimates and that any project overages would be absorbed by the city. Since then, 2 letters have been sent to each property owner liable to pay the local improvement tax. The first was advising them of the changes to the local improvement plan, and the second was advising them of this public hearing. Both letters also reminded them of a petition that City Hall was holding for all those opposed to the project. Since then, the city has received positive feedback from at least 3 property owners who are now in favor of the project, and that represents 16% of the total frontage. No one signed up to speak at today's public hearing, and no written submissions were received. Only one owner has signed the petition. This owner does own one of the larger impacted lots, which represents approximately 13% of the total frontage. The remaining 71% of owners provided no comment on the revised plan. I'm open to any questions council might have.
Thank you, Manager Mitchell, appreciate that. Councillor Jacobson? I'm sorry, I mistook your motion there, action there. So just, so I'm sure for the land usage, you said there, how many people were in favor? 70?
Under the revised plan,
Yes.
it was 16%, 16.
That were opposed.
Opposed.
Under the new plan, in favor. The majority now had no comment, so 71% had no comment at all.
Okay, and signing the petition represented 16?
13.
13, so that's 84, and the 16% left over is what?
In favor.
Thank you. That makes far better sense. That was, it wasn't adding up to the full 100%, so I wondered what was going on with the last few. Very good. Appreciate the clarification. So all persons giving oral presentations that clearly state their name and presentations are to be brief and to the point. After the development officer, we're going to have those in favor, those opposed, and then any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard. Manager Mitchell, was there any additional items that we need to present for the?
Nope,
public?
you already got my presentation.
We're good to go. Very good. And just to confirm, Coordinator Pettibone, do we have anybody to speak in favor or opposed?
We do not, Mayor Creasy.
Very good. And no one who is deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard as well?
Confirm there's no one.
Very good. We've satisfied our requirements for municipal affairs. So I will declare that the public hearing for bylaw 487 is now closed at 5:43 p.m. And I think that brings us relatively on schedule to our next presentation. And I believe that we've got some additional guests here joining us from the Downtown Area Redevelopment Committee. I think we've got Joe Whitbread and Sarah. Are you both with us electronically? Oh, there's Sarah. Now you're on the screen. I can see you there on the screen. Wonderful. Well, welcome both of you. We appreciate that. You're showing up to present to us this evening. Who will be taking the lead?
I'll start if that's okay with your worship. Hello, councillors. Hello, Mayor Creasy, admin staff. Thanks for the opportunity this evening. Sarah and our team with Matt will be presenting the sort of meat and potatoes of our presentation for you tonight, but I wanted to start off and just give you a synopsis of what you're about to hear and see. Hopefully you've had that opportunity to look through, you know, what we're about to share with you. I'm really excited about this project. For those of you who don't know, my name is Joe Whitbread, not only a local business owner with Joe Social Media here in downtown Lacombe, but also a resident, certainly a voice of the progressive and positive things that Lacombe is doing in the greater central Alberta area, but also throughout our province. I have been a huge promoter, like many of you, for our community in a very vocal way, and I love this community. So that's sort of how I wanted to start this evening, is just let you know how I got involved and why I'm involved, and then we'll proceed with introducing you to Sarah and to Matt. DARP is the Downtown Area Redevelopment Plan. I was engaged to join this committee and be a part of it with 9 other incredible members and very positive members of our community, some to which I never met before and some I knew previously. The idea here was to come up with rational and reasonable and responsible ideas that would actually work in congruence with a lot of what you and your team does throughout the year. So we want to introduce you to some of the amazing ideas and visions that our team has come up with. We started together through sort of a public survey, door-to-door conversations, some social media, and some consultation. We arranged and formed our group, and then through these long winter COVID months, we've been meeting every Tuesday excitedly on some opportunities, and those opportunities will be presented to you here this evening. So without further ado, I'll pass things off to my colleagues, Sarah Dennehy and Matt Knapik, who will more specifically go through some of these incredible initiatives that we believe will be congruent and potentially align with many of your ideas, philosophies, and overall what it means to be a resident, a business owner, a community group in this amazing city of Lacombe. So thanks again for the opportunity to present today, and I'll hand it now over to Sarah and to Matt.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so the public engagement process was undertaken by the city, and it began in the fall, really as a way to confirm the public priorities for the downtown, to gather new ideas, and to understand concerns about the future of downtown. There was around 180 people that participated in the online survey. Due to COVID, we couldn't meet anyone in person. But through that survey, it really became clear that ensuring that downtown streets are walkable and accessible to everyone is a key top priority, followed closely by the desire to foster a unique look and vibe downtown. And participants also expressed that they would like to see improvements to the quality of streetscapes, making streets pedestrian friendly or perhaps even pedestrian only in certain cases, and really more places and things to do that attract people downtown in order to support local businesses and fill storefront vacancies around the downtown to make it lively. As Joe outlined earlier, the next step in the process was the formation of this advisory committee that was made up of downtown residents, business owners, property owners, and organization representatives. And these individuals brought an immense amount of enthusiasm to this work and a really keen understanding of the challenges and the opportunities that the downtown faces. And so building off of the feedback that was collected through the public engagement, the committee generated project ideas and further filtered and prioritized those projects with the consideration of how they would address the vision and the priorities that are outlined in the DARP, improve the downtown experience for residents and visitors and different users of all types, the level of impact they would have, and how the project might find efficiencies with existing initiatives. So through this process, the committee has selected 8 priority project recommendations to implement in the downtown over the next 10 years. And Matt will give a quick overview of each one.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks for having us here. My name is Matt Knapik, or Matt Knapik, from O2 Planning and Design. I'm an urban designer and an associate, and Sarah and I work together there. Sarah leads our engagement group. I'm going to run through these projects pretty quickly. There will be an opportunity for conversation and questions afterwards. So we'll just move forward quickly then. The public space connector was really an idea to provide some kind of a magnet that worked to connect the downtown spaces, but also became a place that people could gather. So the word catalyst was really important to the committee here in terms of creating a flexible place that could host the kind of public life that we know is kind of bursting at the seams, waiting to emerge throughout the downtown. It could include things like seating, other elements like fire pits, games, music, and really this became sort of a key idea that the committee was really enthusiastic about. So it likely involves finding the right site and the right place, and this is something that the committee was keen to begin looking for right away. The second project, so some of these are big, some are smaller. The second one was about string lights. This is all about ambience, the romance of downtown. The idea here, I think, is really about encouraging people to come and use downtown for longer hours. And part of that is about making it a more inviting, welcoming, cozy, and splendid place after dark. And so this was a small, simple move that can have a significant impact on the quality of a space and the attractiveness of a space. Downtown entry and landmark signs, anyone who's done any traveling, I'm sure has come across these in lots of different places. To me, they play really two important roles. One is about wayfinding, understanding where you are and what it's about, and that sense of arriving in downtown imbues it with a district quality that's really important for that sense of arrival and that sense of specialness. We do a lot of work in Edmonton as well, and we're stationed in Calgary. So we, in the before times, would spend a lot of time driving up and down between Calgary and Edmonton. And Lacombe is our favorite stopover, and we'd come into downtown. And so I know how important, that sense of arrival is specific to Lacombe. It's one of our favorite places. The other role that these kind of things play is really about identity, right? So it's not just about signaling where you are, but what the place is about, that it's growing and that it's exciting and that there's new investment. And we know from the downtown plans that we're working on all across the province that downtown and people's perception of downtown sends a really important signal about the health and vitality of the entire place, right? Economically, socially, culturally. So, and then again, the sign, this kind of entry feature tells a story about downtown. So nested stories here, a small element that can play a really important role. Pedestrian accessibility and improvements. There was a lot of consciousness among the committee that they wanted downtown to really be an inclusive place where there was as few barriers as possible for people to participate, regardless of their ability or mobility. Elements that help support this mobility would include things like street furniture, crossings, and other elements that you have within the public realm that create that reduced barrier and invite use. Part of the opportunity there, again, is to, brighten public amenities and promote that distinct downtown character, and also to provide a level of accessibility that takes a step beyond the typical city standard, again, signaling that downtown has that kind of role as a civic heart and a core of public life. Lest we forget park surface upgrade, lots of great feedback we heard about the ice rink in the winter. I know it's been a big part in Calgary, at least of my winter activity in the city, and I think a really great place to gather as well, a great social hub, and that really extends the magic of the world, the place we live all throughout the year. Questions here about whether or not that was having an adverse impact on the surface underneath, and so this looked to explore new surfacing for some portions of Lest We Forget Park in order to support that continued use throughout seasons, so that it wasn't a question of replacing grass or doing undue damage through a winter installation. The tree asset management plan, this was really born from the assessment among the committee that trees provided to the downtown such an important part of the spatial character, sense of place, connection to landscape, and so were something that was really valued. A document like a management plan really starts to look at life cycle and lifespan of trees and starts to ensure that actions are taken to maintain over the long term the quality of the canopy that you have in the downtown area and to extend it where possible. This is an interesting step for a downtown plan, but I think a really important one in the sense that when I see people assess streets, often people get hung up on building and building heights, when they're figuring out what kind of street they like. But I think when you show people 20 pictures of streets, they love the ones with trees on them. So I think the committee hit on something there in terms of creating meaningful investments in the future of the tree canopy in the downtown. Pedestrian-friendly shared street. We know from lots of towns and cities across Canada and the United States that this trend has a really positive impact on downtowns in that it provides not only the conduit for when you need it and brings feet and cars past business frontages during the day, but also allows the street to become a destination of itself, to become the sort of place where civic life plays out in the downtown. And so the idea here would be a pedestrian-focused street that had shared spaces, and really allowed for that kind of engagement of pedestrian amenity within the street, a focal point, and that could be explored with various degrees of periodic closure. I think the lessons we've learned is that completely severing off a place to any kind of flow doesn't typically pan out in the long run, even in a place like downtown Calgary. So here, I think the ability to create something with flexible use that can adapt is really the key here, and what makes that a really valuable project. And then finally, decorative crosswalks. So again, multiple roles that these projects are playing in terms of the criteria that they're fulfilling. In this case, brightening and making the entire area more friendly and interesting and engaging. Also sending a signal about the cultural vitality of the place. And then in a very practical sense, improving the safety for pedestrians in the downtown area by making those crossings very visible, sometimes textured, and really, making visible the way that you'd like to knit together the pedestrian realm that connects through all of the streets in the downtown core. So that's the last project in the list. When we look at the downtown capital project priorities list, you see that it looks like a few more than 8, and that's just because a few of these pieces, like pedestrian accessibility and improvements, for example, which you see in 4A and 4B, have multiple parts. And really the early part of some of those includes elements like preliminary design standards and planning work. We know what the answer is. We know the answer is increased accessibility, but there's a little bit more work to be done to figure out exactly where and how investment can be leveraged to produce the greatest and most effective use of funding and the greatest impact on accessibility. Same with the tree asset management plan, and the less we forget park surface upgrade. So there's a little bit of sort of steps towards like developing strategies and assessing options so that a more informed decision can be made down the line. Certainly, you can see there's short, medium, and long term here. And the idea really is to implement initiatives in that early phase that are low risk and have high impact, welcome visitors, really, again, going back to that word of catalyst to try and kick things over in terms of the R in DARP, which is really about renewal or revitalization and redevelopment, right? So it's really about sending that signal and lighting that spark, and then the medium and long term are really about seeing those projects through over the longer time periods. That ends my little overview. I'm going to pass it back over to our wonderful citizen, Joe Whitbread. Thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you, Sarah, and Citizen Joe here to just sort of reiterate our thanks to Council and Mr. Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity to present to you. Obviously, in your community, many of you have learned in the many years you've lived here, worked here, and now represent us on a grander scale. There are a lot of people with ideas. What I have been privileged to be a part of, along with my 9 other colleagues and these 2 wonderful experts who do this for a living, for other communities that are showing vibrancy and incredible growth and success, for that matter, is that we really focused in on the safety, the inclusion. You'll notice there's plenty on beautification, but also in success. I think many of you would agree with me in congruence that Lacombe is the envy of many communities in our area, let alone the province. It takes anecdotes like Matt's from Edmonton, coming down here, stopping in, whether it's for a beverage, a visit, a skate in the park in the wintertime. We just want to have some of those ideas actually transpire into amazing visions that'll make our community better, which is in congruence, hopefully, to what Council always has wanted for our community. We believe we're an ally to Council, and we want to spend money responsibly, reasonably, and create a better life for our citizens, our business owners, and our community groups. So with that said, again, a huge thank you to Guy, the Economic Development Officer, who is on our committee as well, to Sarah, to Matt, and my 9 other colleagues. And I'll turn it over to you for questions that hopefully we're able to answer here or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. We appreciate it. You're 100% correct. Everyone in our city does have lots of great ideas, but it's still nice to see many of them presented in a structured way. And we appreciate and value all the work that's went into this. So thank you for presenting. I'm sure that Council will have some lots to think about and certainly some questions tonight. So thanks again. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think this is an awesome plan, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasm to put it into visual and get it going. One question that's probably going to come up is pedestrian-friendly shared street. Obviously, there are some businesses that pertain to seniors for accessibility for parking. That's the only, out of all of the line items, that's the only one where I can see a concern. In other words, it's a lot of beautiful aesthetic improvements that I would love to see and have our downtown even promoted that much more. I'm on culture and tourism, and we have a new coordinator that I think this would be awesome to promote. So even the visions of it, but maybe if you could have if you have any comments on expand more on the pedestrian friendly shared street, please.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. I think like there's obviously a whole other round of design to do in conception to figure out exactly how that's configured. But we've done shared streets. You'll see one actually in High River that we did after the flood there that O2 worked on both the downtown plan and then the street design specifically with our landscape studio. In that case, what you see is a street that doesn't necessarily just remove parking. We still have parking along the sides of the street, and that's for exactly the reason you say. We know when it's open as a street that we still need access to support the businesses that are along there so that they can benefit from the flows that move in front of them. And that we know that when there are events and things like that, some of that peripheral parking really can play a role in providing accessible access to those things. So I really don't see the two things as being separate. And I would suggest that that any kind of additional design of the pedestrian friendly shared street would almost certainly involve street parking as an embedded consideration and accessible parking as a top priority. So yeah, it's a great observation, and I think it's certainly something that we can overcome with little trouble.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. As a former downtown business owner for 10 years, I'm super excited about this report. I think it's, I've always said from day one that a healthy, vibrant downtown is critical to any community. And so as our downtown goes, so too goes the rest of our communities. So I just wanted to give kudos out to Joe and the rest of the business community downtown and your collaborative team there in putting this report together. I look forward to seeing it implemented. Really excited about 282 participants and feedback from 282 people. I think that's terrific. That's better than some surveys we do in this community. So no, I think it's exciting, and I'm 100% on board. Thank you.
We appreciate that feedback. Thank you very much. I will pass it along to my colleagues as well, who certainly deserve credit in the long hours through the long COVID winter, along with Sarah and Matt. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I too will echo the praise of what I see here. I think it's really exciting. I do have a question, however, on the string lights suggestion. I'm just curious as to why that seems to be limited to 50th Avenue and 51st Avenue, like the 50th Street, sorry. Between, like, so it's, you know, the area is large. We have trees on numerous streets. That is certainly a highlight street, as in, you know, architecturally, that sort of thing. But I worry that we're maybe ignoring the rest of downtown because, you know, 51st Street is a nice street with many trees as well. And you could almost argue that it would be more attractive if it was, you know, lit. As someone who's downtown a lot, I work downtown. I'm there in the you know, winter, you know, walking the streets after many of the businesses have closed, and it is a little bit drab and potentially a little bit not scary, because our community isn't scary, but it's a little off-putting to be walking down dark streets. And I am actually really excited about this light idea, because honestly, if an area is well lit like that, especially in that sort of format, it's warm, it's welcoming, it kind of makes you want to be there. So I guess that would be my question. I'm assuming it's probably driven more by dollars than anything else, but I guess I would put that to you and ask you why that is, that in that specific item that it's only with regards to one street.
Sure, I think I can start to speak to that. I mean, you're correct in that when the first quote came back, you know, that little piece there being $50,000 on its own. I mean, there was a perception, I think, at first that really you just go down to Costco and buy some string lights and then we can throw them up and it'll be really, really cheap. But, you know, when we look at the proper connections and getting the electrical boxes in and all that sort of thing to really do it right, the price rises up a little bit. I think, though, that there's nothing preventing that from spreading wherever people find value in it. I think that's the best thing I could say to that, is that I would hope that this report in prompting that doesn't preclude it from growing to other places, and that whether you see this first installation as a pilot or as a test or whatever else, if it's something that grows, I would see, you know, from the perspective of downtown and the DART, no issue with it spreading throughout. It is something that is flexible in that way, and that you don't have to make a huge investment up front, that you can grow it over time, and you can grow it as things, you know, you can leverage other work that's happening as well to add that kind of lighting in when you're doing other kinds of lighting upgrades to functional lighting. So I think there's lots of opportunity there, and the idea that, you know, this could be really something that's spread through downtown, it's a really warm and beautiful idea, and I hope that actually happens. So.
Yeah, if I can just quickly comment on Matt's observation. Thank you, Councillor. I want to be very clear. Many times in our many meetings, we made sure not to just focus on the single street that everyone considers our downtown on 50th. So I do want to be very clear. We were cognizant and conscious of that the entire time. I echo what Matt says completely. If we have budget, and frankly, there will be no Costco visit. It'll be Nowco Home Hardware or PV Mart in Lacombe, where we'll visit and potentially even, thank you, and potentially even offer opportunities for businesses to engage in that. So we are absolutely, I echo what Matt's saying, we welcome other streets and fully inclusion and inclusive to all of downtown, because you're absolutely right. Everything you said, I agree with in terms of its doldrums feeling, but also the trees that deserve some love on other streets.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because yeah, I definitely feel that a lot of these proposals both, and I think you mentioned this, identify things that can enhance our beauty as well as our safety for our downtown, and that those are both going to attract, you know, the right kind of attention, and that's people downtown enjoying it. So thank you.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd also like to endorse this project. I think it's great, especially the street, the part, or not the street that's closed, the street that is designed to be closed and used for activities. I think we need more activities downtown. I'd love to see farmers markets, those types of activities, stores move out onto the streets, kind of like in Europe where you see those that happen all the time. I do have a question regarding the tree asset management, and Matt, you could probably enlighten me on this. We have a tree asset management already through the city, do we not? We do not manage our trees. We don't have somebody taking care of our trees.
No. So we have a person who is responsible for the parks, of which the trees are a part. We don't have a comprehensive plan of the plans for replacement, where I could say how many trees will need replaced next year, the year after, 5 years from now. So there's no overarching plan. We do have, of course, dedicated professional staff, but they're largely operational. So I had put it to the mayor that it's more of a wait till they die approach.
I mean, that's a plan.
It is a plan.
In fairness, I think that Councillor Gullickson was referring, I think we had spoke of this council as a whole. That was one item for our asset management plan that could be added, but we felt that while all of the items on there are important, there was others that were more of a priority than that. So that's something that one day will be added, but currently it's not underway.
Well, no, but I mean, if there's a problem tree downtown, you would look at replacing it with a tree that's similar. Yes, to that. So I mean, there is a bit of a plan in place for tree replacements if they die, but as far as new trees, there's probably not anything for that, just existing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
I think that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think in part, like, it sounds like there's a procedure for tree management, but not necessarily a plan. And what the plan helps do in some cases is prevent there from being the situation where, for example, you have a whole swath of trees on a particular street come to the end of their life cycle at the same time, and then you end up with losing losing character in one fell swoop where you have a bunch of little seedlings all of a sudden, you know, in their place all at once. So tree management plans can help to try and build that up over time to identify places where you could add more trees, and you know, so it's a little bit more of a comprehensive approach that's a little bit less reactionary than a kind of replacement procedure. So just to clarify what the intent was there.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'm an individual that's grasping for something positive in these frustrating times, but I guess two-part question, one for CEO Gowdy. What is the amount already set aside with the DART program currently? And all due respect, but we've got phases that go over to 2029. And I thought there was a significant amount already in reserve. And my second part question, why, if knowing that what that amount I think is, why so long? Because it's like, yeah, I think this would be awesome for downtown to be happening sooner than later.
Okay, so there's kind of two questions there. Council did approve $1.7 million over 10 years. I believe that was allocated in 2019, so it would take you out to 2029.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was more of a start.
We had proposed, rather than doing 170,000 per year, to try and initially, if you look at your 10-year capital plan, it's they're consolidated across 2 years, so it's $340,000 every 2 years. With this prioritization coming out with the project here, or with the report here, that has sort of clarified when those expenses are estimated to happen. I'm sure I speak for the entire project team when I say they would love to see those investments advanced. If there's the fiscal capacity of the city that they want to make that investment faster, I'm sure people would welcome that. But of course, you do have competing priorities and budgets are constrained. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there is a vegetation component that talks about the tree canopies within your natural spaces management plan from 2005. So there was a bit of a tree assessment at that time. Of course, it's 15 or 16 years ago, but it wouldn't be as in-depth, I think, as what's being proposed under the tree asset management plan, which would be more like looking at trees the same way as you look at roads and saying, when are we going to repave these roads? When should we be pruning these trees? When should we be looking at selective replacement and making sure that the species are planned out, that sort of thing. So there was, I shouldn't have said there's no plan. There's a dated plan that does have some talk about natural landscaping features and that kind of thing.
So that answers both my questions. My apologies. I thought there was more up front. I apologize for that.
Anyone else? Well, thank you once again, all three of you, for joining us this evening. We appreciate the information.
Thank you very much for your time and support.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I appreciate it.
Good, so I believe that takes us down to section 5, our requests for decision. And the first item up, as I look through my list of individuals online, is Manager Lapointe with us, or is Director Piche perhaps taking that item? Our Eco Energy letter of credit item. I've got Manager Lapointe here.
Lapointe, yes.
Here. There's his voice. Sorry. Guy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. 1 second here. So good evening, Mayor Creasy and Council. Thank you for having me again this evening. This evening, Council is asked to consider increasing the Eco Energy line of credit required by the Alberta Electrical System Operator and gas providers to $250,000. As you know, the community energy retailer launched in 2013 and now has over 500 electricity, a little bit more than 400 natural gas, and approximately 40 internet accounts now as well. Echo Lacombe Association directs the proceeds from the energy and internet sales to facilitate its community economic development initiatives and programs. For any of you that were around, I know there's at least 2 of you, at inception, the city partnered with UtilityNet to establish the initiative. UtilityNet handles procurement and billing responsibilities, while Echo manages customer acquisition. Additionally, as a retailer, Echo must provide the required prudential amounts requested by the Alberta Electrical System Operator and the gas providers. So the prudential is essentially security for each customer, and it's tied to market rates. So as market rates increase and as Echo onboards new customers, the prudential will expand. So the prudential amounts may take the form of cash or a letter of credit, which is what we're using at the moment. And the current letter of credit is issued for $150,000. But with Echo's growth and increasing prices, there is a need to increase that amount further. Echo mitigates any risk by requiring a credit check of prospective customers in advance to signing them on. Further, when any bad debt is incurred, it is paid directly from revenues earned. As a result, the letter of credit has never been drawn upon. As indicated, Echo is looking to increase the letter of credit to $250,000, allowing for some bandwidth to manage further growth and continued market fluctuations. And Service has also confirmed that this increase will not amount to any incremental cost, additional incremental cost. So with that, I'm open to any questions or comments you may have.
Appreciate it, Manager Lapointe. Councillor Jacobson.
Sure, this question is for CEO Gowdy. So I guess it's Service Credit Union provides this. So do they provide that letter to UtilityNet unsecured, or do they require cash deposits from the city for that?
It is secured against the city's credit rating only with other holdings we have with Service.
Okay.
So there's no cash held up, and there's actually no impact because of our credit rating with them. Even to go from 150 to 250 is no impact in cost to the city.
Thanks.
And along those same, just for public stuff, that portion will still count towards our overall debt limit then, will it not?
Yes. Yes.
I'm not suggesting that we not go through with this, but I just want to be open to everyone to the impacts of that are minimal, but it's still an impact. Councillor Ross.
Thank you. I move that council approves an increase in the letter of credit for Echo Energy from $150,000 to $250,000.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? I believe that is unanimous. Thank you. Don't you wish they were all that easy, Manager Lapointe?
Thank you.
You better stick around for a minute here. We've got item 5.2, the downtown area redevelopment plan, capital project recommendations. If you care to go through that, please.
Absolutely. So this evening, council received a presentation from the DARP Advisory Committee and O2 Planning and Design, relaying the recommended capital projects for inclusion in the city's 10-year capital plan. This process had 2 distinct phases. Information was first collected from the larger community via an online survey, and a second, more collaborative effort was undertaken where administration met with advisory committee members to work through project identification and prioritization. The result is the project list council received earlier, which fully expends the $1.7 million allocated to this work over 10 years. Of the items discussed, there was significant interest in advancing the public space connector, given its alignment with much of the DARP qualifying criteria. The committee even identified a possible location for the project, but unfortunately it has since sold. To maintain the energy the committee had for this concept, the planning document remains a short-term priority, and you'll notice that on the list, while the larger project work is deferred to the long term. The committee does want to point out that should an opportunity be identified to advance the project, they'd like administration to look for ways to prioritize those dollars appropriately. Administration also acknowledges that not all items on the list are capital in nature. The committee believes these studies will help establish standards that will advance some of the fundamental priorities identified without exhausting the assigned budget. Finally, there is keen interest from the group in extending the role, and you could hear that from Mr. Whitbread this evening. Advisory committee members believe a regular DARP committee will help inform project development, especially those listed in the short term. Formalizing the advisory committee's function will empower them as long-term partners with both council and administration. Administration is recommending that council incorporate the capital projects presented in the downtown area redevelopment plan capital projects implementation report. Don't say that 10 times fast. Into the 2022-2031 capital plan, and consider extending the DARP advisory committee via an upcoming committee review report. With that, Manager Mitchell and myself are open to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Is it not already in our 10-year capital plan?
It is in your 10-year capital plan as placeholders. This will shift some money from some years to consolidate it for the actual funding identified for these projects.
So this would just identify those projects specifically then?
Yeah, instead of every 2 years having 340,000, you just held as DARP implementation. It will have actual earmarked funds for these phases of the
specific. Okay.
Same amount total.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So already was there not in the sidewalk budget to finish the sidewalks on 50th Street? Is that separate from sidewalk enhancement? So that could actually move things around for DART for further things, or is that?
Yes, I think. So there's, the city puts away, it started as $100,000 or allocates $100,000 for replacement of sidewalks in the downtown. It was initially brought around in 2014, I think, for liability concerns with an increased number of trip and fall pants that we were seeing downtown. Largely the worst liability sections of sidewalks have been replaced, not entirely, but largely. And so once those are completed, yes, I think you could look at reallocating those funds to support additional DART projects or enhanced DART projects for sure.
Like lighting, as Councillor Hibbs indicated, moving west, for example.
Yes.
Councillor Cott.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. As I expressed earlier, I'm in full support of this, so I'm prepared to make the motion. Council directs administration to incorporate the capital projects presented in the downtown area redevelopment plan capital projects implementation report into the 2022-2031 capital plan. I know in a perfect world, as Councillor Ross alluded to, it'd be nice to upfront that money all at once, but I like the balanced approach that we've taken. And you know, as we roll these things out, if the lighting goes really well on 50th, there's no reason we can't, or future councils can't find an additional 50,000 to do another street, and then maybe a few years later. So I think it's a huge first step. It's important to take these first steps. It's a long time coming. I know we've been talking, but DARP was, you know, I think it was my first term on council, if I'm not mistaken, Mayor Creasy, we talked about this. So I'm glad to see that we're taking this important first step. And as we build momentum here, we can always add to it as we go. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to verify with council that everyone is okay with either endorsing or not this proposed plan in its entirety, or would you like to have an opportunity for a committee meeting to review some of the individual items to see if in fact they are not in alignment with council's wishes, or are we fine with the way that it is? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm fine with doing a blanket because I don't have a problem with any of these, but I would remind council that future councils at any given year in a budget have the opportunity to make changes. So while we ideally are adding these into the plan, doesn't mean they can't be moved around or altered at a future date. So they're not set in stone, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. That was my point too, that I think if we put these into the budget now with this, it doesn't mean that we can't say we're not going to do it at budget time. We'd have an opportunity to discuss it then individually.
And that is certainly true. It's just that I wanted everybody to know we have the opportunity to go through these wholesale prior. If there's some that you didn't feel were appropriate or that are not worth pursuing, in my opinion, it might be better off to discard them now as opposed to just putting them in the plan for the sake of having them in there, even if they don't really have an opportunity to be implemented, and just get pushed back to the far end of the tenure to be tossed around at that time. So I really don't have a problem with the majority of myself, but I just wanted to know, to make sure that was an option that everybody realized was open to us. So, anyone else? So we do have a motion before us, and I can just have Coordinator Pettibone read back the motion so that everyone is straight on it, please.
Sure. Councillor Connick made the motion that council direct administration to incorporate the capital projects presented in the Downtown Area Redevelopment Plan Capital Projects Implementation Report into the 2022 to 2031 capital plan.
Thank you very much. One additional opportunity. We're all good. All those in favor? Those opposed? I see none. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Director Thompson is with us. Very good. So the next item up is 5.3, bylaw 488, the Regional Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. And I think before we get started, Director Thompson, I'll just have you hold off for 1 second. Councillor Connick, you had a question?
I believe there's a second motion there. Is there not?
Yes. Only if someone chooses to make one.
Jacobson.
And I'm sorry, I did miss a hand from
Okay.
Councillor Jacobson. Go ahead.
I'm just inconspicuous over here. Sure. I'll move that council directs administration to present a potential terms of reference for a new extended DARP advisory committee in an upcoming committee's review report.
Very good. Thank you for catching my attention there, Councillor Connick. We'd hate for them to feel that they weren't valued. So, any comments? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Cruz. I did have one question, actually, just looking at the terms of reference. It spoke to that there would be a member of council. And then later on under decision-making, it said that the city's liaison would attend meetings, but as a non-voting member. So I just wanted to clarify that. So there would be a member of council on the committee, but they would be a non-voting member, or is it any like admin or extra city staff that are there?
It is the latter, that there would be a voting member of council, but there would be a city liaison being most likely our community economic development manager, would be providing support, but not be a voting member.
Okay.
And we can clarify that in the terms.
I was going to say, I'm fine with this then, but if you could make that a little bit more clear, because it was a little bit confusing to me, so I would imagine it might be to somebody else. So thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor? That is unanimous as well. Thank you. So back to item 5.3, bylaw 488 for the Regional Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. Director Thompson, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. According to Council's direction on October 26, 2020, and following passage of first and second reading on March 22nd, 2021, administration presents tonight first for third reading the Regional Intermunicipal Subdivision and Development Appeal Board Bylaw 488. Also, administration is asking for Council's endorsement of the PCPS Services Agreement to provide clerk and board administrative services to the city. The bylaw provides the authority required by the MGA to join the regional SDAB, and the agreement outlines the day-to-day administrative details and costs for PCPS to provide this service. The bylaw and the agreement are interconnected, so Council's endorsement of both is required tonight. The PCPS agreement for regional SDAB services requires a minimum 3-year commitment, and the city's purchasing policy requires Council's endorsement of multi-year agreements. So tonight we are asking Council for third reading and for endorsement of the agreement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council gives third reading to the Regional Intermunicipal Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw 488.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification, Director Thompson said, so there's approximately 20 or so municipalities that were listed. Has this agreement been redone, or are those other ones existing and Lacombe is merely being added on to that list of agreements already in place?
Effectively, the agreements are already in place and Lacombe is being added to it.
Thank you. That agreement wasn't everybody's package. Was there any concerns or questions for administration? That would be nice. Thank you, Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I move that council give third reading to regional intermunicipal subdivision.
You did that motion already.
Oh,
I was gonna say we have.
you did.
Yeah, the motion's on the floor.
It is on the floor.
That was only two of us that missed that then.
I thought so, but it was.
I believe that the motion Councillor Gullickson made was about the third reading.
Yes.
And that Councillor Hibbs was prepared to make a motion for the second one, which is the agreement itself.
There we go. That's what I meant.
Well, let's just vote on both at the same time, be done with this.
Should I finish reading it? That'd be okay.
Well, we should really only have one on the floor at a given time.
Sure.
And that was my apologies for any confusion. Specifically then, the motion that we are voting on now then, Coordinator Pettibone is what?
Specifically, motion, the council give third reading to the Regional Intermunicipal Subdivision Development Appeal Board bylaw 488.
Thank you. Now that everyone's clear on that, with respect to Councillor Gullickson's motion on the floor, all those in favor? I see none opposed. Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I move that council direct administration to enter into an intermunicipal regional subdivision and development board agreement with Parkland Regional Planning Services and Service Package B Clerk Services.
Thank you. Anyone? No comments or questions? We're either very much in favor or very much opposed. I will call the question then. All those in favor? And for the record, those opposed? I see none, so that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Director Thompson.
Very good, thank you.
And then we've also got Planner Teal coming up again here for item 5.4, the land use bylaw 400.33, in conjunction with the earlier public hearing for Hearthstone R3 rezoning. Planner Teal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So just a brief recap, the bylaw is about adding detached dwellings as a permitted use in the R3 district along Hearthstone Drive. So very specific to that area of R3 designated under the the city's land use bylaw. The other part of the bylaw is the addition of a 10-meter height requirement for all development in the R3 district. We've heard interest from some of the property owners that are impacted in possibly we're taking advantage of that change in the future, and others that have just expressed their interest in understanding what was going on. Administration is recommending approval of the bylaw as presented by giving second and third reading to bylaw 400.33.
Thank you. I consider this one to be as much a housekeeping item as anything. I think it was probably implemented for some very good reasons at the time, some nearly 40 years ago, but not really relevant in today's world. So nice to see this come about and a positive change being made, in my opinion. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council give second reading to bylaw 400.33 as presented.
Thank you. Anyone care to speak? Any questions or concerns? And I will call the question. All those in favor? And that was unanimous as well. Thank you, everyone. Manager Mitchell, item 5.5 is the bylaw 487 for the Len Thompson
Are we
paving.
going to do third reading of this?
I blew through another one, did I?
You're consistent.
Manager Mitchell, hang tough for a minute there. Yours truly missed out on a third reading here. Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council give third reading to bylaw 400.33 as presented.
So much for leaving that one until next meeting. Anyone? We're all good? All those in favor? That's unanimous as well. Thank you. Appreciate everyone keeping me straight here. With respect to Len Thompson paving, item 5.5 and bylaw 487, Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll also point out that tonight I'm looking for a second and third reading on this bylaw. So before council is bylaw 487 proposed for second and third reading following the first reading, which happened on March 8th, 2020. This bylaw sets forth the terms and conditions for the local improvement tax for the paving of Len Thompson Drive and 55th Ave. To summarize, the proposed local improvement includes a cost split of 85-15, with landowners paying 15% of the project cost and the city paying 85%. It also includes a clear statement that stormwater issues will be also addressed and provides a maximum cap on costs that will be charged to landowners under the local improvement tax. A public hearing was scheduled for today for residents to share their opinions on the project, but no one registered to speak or provided a written submission. In addition, property owners were informed that if they did not support the project, despite council's January changes, a petition was available and it was hosted at City Hall. The petition was open for 30 days and closed on April 2nd with only one signature. As dictated by the MGA, CAO Gowdy has reviewed the petition and deemed it legally insufficient to invalidate the proposed local improvement. If second and third readings pass today, administration will inform impacted landowners by letter, and council may impose the local improvement tax. Administration will work with Stantec to finalize the design and aim to tender this project in May for construction later this year. Once construction is complete, property owners may pay the full local improvement tax upfront or have it added to their property tax to be paid over the next 15 years. The annual payments will be subject to interest. Council should also be aware that with the change in the funding model, the project is currently underfunded in the 10-year capital plan. Administration proposes that the city's additional 15% of project costs be funded through the road reserve. Once the project is tendered and we have actual dollar values, administration will present the updated cost and funding allocations to council for approval. I'd open the floor to any questions at this time.
Thank you, Manager Mitchell. You had suggested that tendering will take place next month in May. Did you already have a, given that's relatively tight time, I'm assuming you already have a closing date in mind?
We don't have a closing date in time. We are at 60% design, and so Stantec does have some work to do with the shallow utility companies, so Fortis and Telus and Shaw, and so that will help us finesse, I guess, exactly when those dates will happen, but that is the goal, is to get it tendered in May. There might be, with this project, a few question marks, which we tender as, you know, price to be determined close to the time of construction, just to keep this project moving.
Okay, very good. But given it is a mid April, more or less, you're still confident that that pricing can happen within that time frame?
Tendered.
A few exceptions for more complicated items, if there is any.
Correct. That's still the goal, is to tender it in May. It might not close until June. So if we give a 3-week tender period, it might not close until early June, which means construction will be later in the season. Most projects road projects especially have already been tendered for this year. So we are playing a little bit of catch up on this one, but I am still confident that we can pursue construction this year.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just full steam ahead, long overdue. I'm glad we didn't get a huge pushback. Every opportunity was given to those particular landowners, so I'm glad to see that, well, there wasn't a huge endorsement, but there was a fairly large indifferent percentage at any rate. So at that note, I'm prepared to move the council give second reading to bylaw 47 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connick. Any additional questions or concerns before we vote? Seeing none, I will call the question for second reading. All those in favor? Very good. Councillor Jacobson.
I move council give third reading to bylaw 487 as presented.
Thank you. And for third reading, any questions or concerns? Very good. All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is in favor. So now that the voting is over, I would just a quick comment. I just want to thank the fellow councillors for starters, but CAO Gowdy, between you and the engineering team for the approach that and direction was taken on this project. I mean, when you look at the numbers to see, I would suggest substantial pushback initially. In my opinion, this is governance at its best when we genuinely listen to the input of those people who are affected by this decision, made some adjustments. The financial part of it was a portion. In my opinion, I think it was a relatively small one. There were some other factors that went into it that were addressed and will continue to be addressed throughout that project. So I think that is the reason why we had a relatively low number of people that basically one landowner, and I'm sure they have perfectly legitimate reasons for signing that petition. Personally, I'm thankful that there weren't more, so that we can continue on this, because I think it is a much needed upgrade for our city. So just wanted to give credit where credit is due and be sure and thank your team, Chief Gowdy. Thank you.
So thank you.
Item 5.6, we've got a schedule here for May 3rd Council Committee meeting. Chief Gowdy, you want to address that one?
Yes, I will. We propose to add a council meeting on May 3rd. The topics will be an asset management plan update. We have completed the roads and assessment of the city's roads and can provide you some additional information on what the future path looks like. I think council is probably well aware that your investments in roads and the deterioration of roads, there is a gap and it grows. With the completion of some financial modeling as well as the assessment of the actual roads, we can now tell you what those two paths look like. How much, what is the gap, how do you fix it if you wanted to, or how bad would the roads get if you don't fix it. And so that information will be presented on the 3rd. We'd also like to give a little bit more detail at that meeting about the fire services review and make sure you have a good chance to discuss anything you might have before we present it for adoption at a subsequent meeting.
Very good, and that's proposed for March 11th then?
May 3rd.
May 3rd, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong item. I think that's March 11th. That's we got a year to think about it, yeah. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Is there appetite with council to have this meeting starting at 6 again? May I make a motion? Oh,
I seem to see a lot of head nods here, and it seems it'll help you out. I don't think the motion would be appropriate. I'm just giving you a hard time. Of course, you can make a motion, Councillor Uksha. I think that I doubt if anyone will have a problem with that.
That council schedules the committee of the whole meeting at 6:00 p.m. on May 3rd, 2021. As long as everybody knows that's my 35th anniversary.
Ooh. Maybe you would like it earlier then.
Well, but I still work. So.
Okay. Any comments, anyone? No? Councillor Khan has his hand up there. Good. So I will call the question. All those in favor? Great. Look forward to receiving that information, Chief Gowdy. Thank you. And the last item under request for decision was an emergent one regarding patio policy adjustment, item 5.7. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Again, I've come prepared. The ongoing pandemic and its concurrent government-imposed restrictions is having a disproportionate effect on some businesses in our community, more specifically those who offer in-house dining. These businesses do have the ability to potentially mitigate some of the impact by pivoting service delivery, including offering outdoor patio dining. In support of the ability of these businesses to maximize their options, the city should temporarily relax the existing patio policy. For the year 2021, it would be reasonable to grant the CAO discretion to work with business owners to enable them to be able to add or possibly expand outdoor dining spaces beyond what was envisioned in the policy adopted in 2020. There needs to be an ability to be flexible in how and where the area can be delineated and not require expensive investments such as building raised decks. There is still an expectation that there will be an application process, including notification of neighboring property owners and tenants, and that other applicable approvals such as AHS and AGLC are still required. The areas would also need to remain compliant with Government of Alberta restrictions, such as what is defined as patio dining facility and how they are used. These temporary additions, expansions should also expire at the end of the 2021 season, unlike the usual 3 years outlined in the adopted patio policy for the City of Lacombe. I am prepared to make a motion in regards to this, but I'm obviously wanting to make sure that council gets a chance to weigh in on, assuming that you're in support of it, sort of what the ideas that you would, I guess the direction that you would give to administration, which is I'm sure what administration would also be seeking, as I'll be asking for us to be granting essentially the CAO to have discretion. So I would move that council grant the CAO the ability to override for the 2021 season only the City of Lacombe on-street patio policy at their discretion, and that any approvals are applicable only for 2021.
Thank you. Chief Gowdy.
So I have actually had the opportunity to discuss this idea with both Councillor Hibbs and Councillor Ross ahead of time. One thing that I would suggest, and I think it is in line with our previous discussions, is that we would look at discretionary authority being granted to the CAO, not just for the on-street patio policy applications or those that would normally go through that, but also for patio applications or extensions of existing patios on private property. And so there I would say someone like a Boston Pizza maybe, and I haven't received interest from them, but just as an example, may say temporarily while our sit-down dining within the restaurant is closed, we may want to take a couple of extra spots, or maybe the Pho and Rice might take a couple of spots to have some tables out there. And normally those would require a development permit with an appeal period and a fairly lengthy process. I would actually recommend that if you want to go ahead with what we've discussed, which is facilitating additional patios within the community, that we would include those situations within the discretionary ability of the CAO to provide for this season some expedited approvals for expansion of existing patios on private property as well, should those businesses be interested. I have also looked into what the implications would be. So we do have a list of factors that we would still be looking for, things like AGLC approval, AHS approval, their insurance would still need to be notified. And we do have a little bit of a process of how we would go about this. And so maybe just in the interest of supporting the discussion, could I go through those quickly so council knows what?
I think that would be appropriate.
So for on-street patios, should council direct this change, we would release notice of temporary changes by the city's communication channels. We would deploy a CD manager to manage these requests personally. He would meet restaurant staff on site to determine the project scope and any required city resources, consult the neighboring properties, establish a date for delivery and setup of any required materials from the city, and I'll get to that in a moment. Of course, they would need to comply with AHS and AGLC requirements, and we would document this both in photos and a written form with the applicant. For private property, again, we would release notice of these temporary changes, and we would manage the process by planning staff. Essentially, we'd be foregoing the appeal period and expediting the approval process, waiving the application fees for those particular development permit applications relating to patios, and correspondingly refunding those few that we have already approved for the year. All patios would still have to meet the ensure physical safety of patrons and the public. They would have to meet the Alberta safety codes if appropriate. COVID-19 spacing and safety protocols established by the province would have to be met. Liability protection for private commercial uses on public land, insurance requirements, and then a community mindedness commitment that the city would retain the ability to address any nuisance complaints such as noise, and provide for a balanced approach to parking, as patrons are still going to need to access by vehicle. I would also put out that if this is approved, I would ask council for your patience, because I'm sure there will be an inappropriate application of discretion at some point where a mistake will be made and we'll have to walk it back in some way. Thus the nature of an expedited approval. We would recommend this. We have looked into what our ability to provide any support in terms of infrastructure would be. We do have about 30 picnic tables that are underutilized or need minor repairs that we could have up and running within the week to lend to businesses that were interested. So barriers, pylons, and if any funds were approved by council, we would, the next thing we would look at would be probably purchasing and placement of some concrete barriers just for safety if there is additional parking spaces being taken up by these facilities, and those can be reused for later city uses.
Thank you, Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I, as well, have had several conversations with in the last couple of days of options of materials and so forth, and as CO Gowdy alluded to, concrete barricades for safety, and that can be later used within the city. But even if there was a purchase of additional picnic tables, I think there's many user groups within the city. Having volunteered myself doing fundraisers, I think there would be a great future use of additional tables, for example, like the airport breakfast or Canada Day breakfast and Lacombe Days, and there's many different organizations that are always looking for additional for their outdoor activities that promote Lacombe. So it can be looked at as an expense, but I think it also can be looked at as an investment to assist the user groups too. So as a budget, obviously for barricades and perhaps additional tables that could be perhaps permanently put in, like a concrete stained aesthetic table, that there's areas that would make sense to keep people downtown or go purchase their lunch to take out and enjoy it. I guess that's where there's a lot of businesses that I feel it's been, the lockdown has been unfair to the restaurant demographics 3 times now, where they're getting very frustrated that it's, it seems to be specific to them. At first, it was complete lockdown, that was partial, that included other demographics, and I think the community, they've adapted, but they've done all that they could. So I would like to also perhaps propose if there's a $30,000 or $40,000, because we have saved a significant amount of operational costs from a closure of our recreational facilities that has created a surplus that we could utilize, that I think it would show great support of our business community and our non-profit groups, both short-term and long-term. So I think an amount of, like, say, $40,000 because of purchase of tables. The unfortunate thing is supply. I've looked into and everything. It's extremely frustrating in my current job, and you hear, well, cost of lumber, and it's very frustrating in the supply right now. So I don't know if it's even possible, but I would like to add to it if there was next amount for so that administration can keep moving forward with creating it. I think it would be a wonderful perceived effort that we're doing what we can. There's limited solutions, but I think there's some ways that we can assist to set them up to succeed.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I appreciate everything that Councillor Hibbs and Ross have said. I am concerned, though, about supporting it financially or with supplies for the restaurants that have invested a great deal to have a patio already. How do we support them then? Because they already put personal funds or business funds into it. So how is that going to be perceived? I'm curious.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I guess I could answer that as I think most of the restaurants that have existing patios would probably in essence have an interest in doubling it to accommodate what they already have. So there's some beautiful patios that, like, for example, Lido's and Untitled Chapter, they did a huge investment last year, but they're not even going to entertain for 1 year to expand what they have in terms of the design that they have. It's temporary, like the concrete barricade for safety and what tables the city or we could purchase provide. So like they just want to be allowed more space, is from the conversations what I'm getting. So
Chief Gowdy, have you been approached by any restaurants on this subject this year?
Not me personally, but I did talk to our community economic development development manager today about that. He has reached out, and there is quite a bit of interest both in what Councillor Ross has spoken of with the expansion of existing patios, and then also some that wouldn't typically make use of an on-street patio, but would look to make use of public space. So if you were to look at Tollers, maybe setting up in a green part of the green area near them, or a Cappuccino's has expressed interest in sort of expanding within the area in front of their business. But there has been interest expressed, not to me directly, but through our staff.
So for myself, as I hope everyone knows, I'm very pro-business, but I see this to be rather problematic in a few areas. As far as expanding patios on streets, I think that we've got a process in place for good reason. I see some equally as many unhappy business owners and customers as I do happy ones. I think that's an area that we need to really tread cautiously as far as streamlining the process for additional space on private property. I think that we need to do everything that we can to try and facilitate that. But as far as investing city funds in private enterprise, myself, I draw the line there. I don't think that that is, I think it's very unfair, and I don't think that that's the city's role. Quite frankly, I would be more in favor of engaging businesses to be open for dine-in before I did that, and I'm not advocating for that. But so yeah, there's some problems with this one. But as far as flexibility for making the patio dining on private property possible, I think that that's a wonderful idea. I think that in theory should remove a substantial amount of liability from the city, of which that we can expect some otherwise. So that's really all that I have on the subject at this point in time. Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question regarding the COVID funding that the city received. Was that just strictly allocated to our potential losses due to COVID in our operations? Or was it allocated for us to support residents in Macomb and businesses?
So you can use it for, or the funds could be used for any of those purposes, but they needed to be allocated by March 31st. Now, having said that, they were fully utilized, and you will have a large surplus because of the timing of their recognition. You will have a large surplus that you're dealing with at your next meeting, which will go into your operating reserve. How you use those funds is entirely up to you, whether you want to use them to offset COVID-related losses, give it to community groups, or use it to put in new sidewalks, is entirely up to council. So you will have, I would say, your surplus will be a larger surplus than the community is used to because of the timing of those COVID funds and because of the way they're recognized. But I wouldn't subject them to any less stringent spending decisions than any other dollars that you have in your control, because they are really there to be used for whatever you see fit as council. And so, yes, they could be used for this, but they could be used for anything.
Do you know, just a second, can I do another thing? Do you know if the province has any programs to assist restaurants with outdoor dining?
In their announcement, they said that there would be additional supports programs forthcoming. The details would be announced shortly. They have not come out yet. I would predict that they will not be timely enough to make a large difference, but only time will tell. It's very possible, I think, that 2 weeks from now, the province actually reopens restaurants for in-person dining, and this becomes much less of an issue, but you don't know until we get there.
And the other question I had in our discussion regarding the broom tree, for example, downtown, and sidewalk tables, how would they fit into this application?
So they would be treated outside of the normal, so I guess just to go back and give a little context for the rest of council, the broom tree has expressed a desire that the Broom Tree Cafe to occupy some public space on a walkway with some tables and chairs. That's not contemplated in your on-street patio policy, which only talks about taking up parking spaces. We would look at an expedited approval of that sort of a proposal under this temporary patio extension program if approved by council. So that would be similar to if Tollers said we want to take a bit of the boulevard there. Public space is public space, and if we could accommodate it safely, we would do so.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a few thoughts. I did contemplate, of course, that there is the private property side of things, so that's covered under bylaw 400. I think that it would be best to actually separate those into two separate motions, which is why the first one that I proposed was just specifically with the on-street patio policy. When I was drawing this up, I was envisioning that we as a community are doing our best to not stand in the way of, businesses being able to pivot and adapt. And I find that because we have that policy under normal circumstances, it's a great policy and it will serve us well, I'm sure. But in this situation, it's extraordinary circumstances. You have limited capacity on, you know, something that's existing already, and it does alter things. And so my goal in this is for, you know, us as a community not to be standing in the way of the ability of businesses to adapt. That's not the same as saying that I want to necessarily invest a bunch of public dollars or whatever the case may be. I mean, I want to support the business, and obviously safety is important, but I'm not intending this to necessarily mean that the city is now putting public dollars into businesses, as was mentioned, because I do have concerns about that. As much as I support these local businesses, my goal is just to not be in the way, but not to necessarily facilitate that happening. Does that make sense? So that, I guess that would just be my comments. So again, right now I'd like to just address the one specific patio policy, and then perhaps do another, or somebody else can, do another motion on the private property bylaw 400 aspect. And no dollars are necessarily attached to either of these at this moment in time. I should say no, but.
Anyone else? Councillor Kodak.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm just looking for clarification there too. I like you support the idea of the expansion or the creation of new outdoor dining spaces. I'm a little concerned with the expansion of existing ones, especially on public roadways. So I just need some clarification on this particular motion of what we're exactly addressing. Also, just one other comment, I might have a line on a number of free picnic tables that are in good condition, but I have to look into that. That maybe that's something we can get for nothing to redistribute within the community. Thank you.
Councillor Hibbs.
Sorry, Mayor Creasy, I just, this talk about picnic table just reminded me of one more point I wanted to make in that, not exactly related to either of these motions, but it is my expectation that the city would try to utilize our green spaces and put in, you know, picnic tables that don't exist right now, so that they can be used by people that are, say, picking up lunch at whatever restaurant and walking down to the LMC, for example. And while I know there are some picnic tables there could be more, right? So that's, you know, public property for everybody's use. And if we do have an inventory, that would make sense to deploy them as such. So that was just a point I meant to make earlier and I forgot. So thank you.
Thank you. So Chief Gowdy, just so everybody is on the same page and those watching at home, our current patio policy contemplates usage of street areas. Correct. For a portion of the year. Yes. Does that extend to other public lands or no?
It does not. It is specific to, it is called the on-street patio policy, and it is specific to on the roadway.
Very good. So I just wanted to make that clear. And that's, once again, that's the street one I have issue with. I think that this is a wonderful initiative for private areas and for public property, provided we can address the liability concerns for public property other than streets, because I see that being a very contentious thing, and this is the last thing that we need, is to drive the wedge in deeper, that we all see far too often over this favorite issue of the world's. And it would be extremely unfortunate, as was stated earlier, for us to make some pretty dramatic changes for good reasons, but some pretty dramatic reasons, and then have the use be null and void in two weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it may be, and have those businesses have made changes and made investments in utilizing that space, all for it to be for naught. So I guess in short, that's why I find it difficult to support this particular motion, simply because it does refer to streets. But as far as the initiative and for the remaining areas for public spaces and public lands and private lands, absolutely wholeheartedly support it, but that's just my opinion. Anyone else? Councillor Jacobson?
I have a motion read back.
You certainly can. Coordinator Pettibone, could you have the motion before us, or repeat it, please?
Certainly, Mayor Creasy. I'll do you one better. I'll replay Councillor Hibbs' motion right now.
That council grant the CAO the ability to override for the 2021 season only the City of Lacombe on-street patio policy at their discretion, and that any approvals are applicable only for 2021.
How does that sound?
Perfect, thank you. Some new and technical ability that I don't believe we've utilized in the past, but thank you for that.
Just before he quits.
Councillor Jacobson?
I guess I'll just weigh in because everybody else has. Whatever this thing is, this lockdown, this back to stage one or whatever, it really pisses me off. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's so many holes to poke in it that I don't want to get into all that. And I completely concur about the street thing. But if this is my one little chance to vote to bring something what I consider sanity back to whatever this is, I'm going to support it.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Well, the motion itself gives the flexibility to CAO. And it would be, I mean, I don't imagine there's going to be a huge rush. There'd be, what would you think, number of applications? 3, 4, maybe?
10, 20?
Oh, well, how many do you think will come in right away?
10 or 20?
To put it out on the street. We don't have 10 or 20 restaurants on our streets.
You'd add them all up, you'd be surprised.
Well, they have private property too. Like, I mean, I think there's probably 3 or 4 that would come forward right away. And we could say that, because I do believe also that there's a possibility that depending on the numbers, we could be looking at a rollback again in a couple of weeks to back to indoor dining. If we can get the proper numbers for hospitalizations and ICU admittance. So I don't mind the motion because it gives discretion to our CAO to say, okay, we're going to have this. We're just waiting for the next approval. If it's not there, then we will go, because I think we'll have a better idea in about 2 weeks exactly where we're going to be as far as this stage one. I agree with Jonathan. If we're in a position where this is going to be extended, we need to do something to make our community feel better.
Councillor Hoekstra?
I'll pass. That's okay. Thank you.
Very good. So we had the motion read back to us. And if everyone, unless there's additional questions or concerns, seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? And those opposed? That would be.
I just had one further comment after the motion's been
Oh,
accepted.
that's too late, you're opposed.
No.
So that was one in opposition myself.
And Ruben.
And Councillor Connick as well. So there was 2 against, just for the record. Councillor Connick, is that correct? Thank you. You can tell by the head nod there, that was the affirmative. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So with all due respect, but COVID has put the city in a surplus position in some area because of the shutdowns. And that it was wise decisions made by administration to act upon it and forcibly so. But I, with all due respect, disagree that if there were materials to be needed to help the relationship and expedite the process even more, I looked at it as an investment. If there was additional possibility of purchasing more tables to accommodate the more of the need, if Councillor Connick can get more, or the city has more and it accommodates it. But if there is a need for more, I think even there might be the opportunity to aesthetically improve by having the idea of concrete stains. It's just, and these times, I agree, like Councillor Jacobson, we're getting tired of this. We're trying to find and create something positive. I think this is an investment, because if there were extra tables even purchased, I volunteered prior in the past with Rotary or Lacombe Days, and there's always somebody looking to make their event easier to have more tables. I looked at it as a gesture that it only enhances it. So I think it's easier for administration moving forward there needs to be a budget amount for materials that be needed as concrete barricades or whatever may be needed to the CEO's discretion. And I think there needs to be a budget to make that effectiveness faster. And I would like to make a motion that council approve a budget of $30,000 for the CEO administration to make this happen faster and more expedient. And I think that is what is needed as a budget to move forward.
Councillor Hibbs.
Oh, no, go ahead. I have some mine's later.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sure. Well, at the risk of sounding like I'm arguing with myself in my last comments, with all due respect, Councillor Ross, I guess I disagree only because, yeah, we might be in surplus now because of accounting functions, but really I have no idea what financial freight trains are coming at us at the end of all this when this is all done. I mean, with all due respect, some barricades and paint for restaurants, which we have voted to stay out of the way from, is really not going to amount to a hill of beans compared to what we could be having to deal with down the road once we see where all the dust is settled. And I fully concur with both Councillor Hoekstra and the mayor's position that I don't want to devote any city funds to facilitating anything, merely the idea of getting out of the way. But my question was for the CAO. The previous motion that passed did not address anything to facilitate anything on private property, correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, I don't know what kind of a motion, what the word, kind of recognition of a motion worded to that effect when you have that?
That's actually why I had my hand up, but
Right.
we had a motion on the floor, so I didn't want to.
Okay, all right, so that's all I have to say.
Well, your point is taken. There is a motion on the floor, so we will address it first. And I expect there will be more coming afterwards, so. Anyone else? Does anyone need the motion read back to them? Yes, no? You're good? All those in favor? And those opposed? That was defeated.
Yeah.
Any additional items? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Sorry, I jumped the gun earlier. That's why I was canceling my hand up. So I have actually the exact same wording except just a slight switch up for the next motion, and that would be that council grant the CAO the ability to override for the 2021 season the City of Lacombe bylaw 400 development permitting process for outdoor patios at their discretion, and that any approvals are only applicable for 2021. So essentially the exact same motion, but now for private property situation. So if that sounds like it fits the bill, then that would be the motion I would put forward.
And just for the record, that is the correct bylaw number. And you made that at his discretion.
Well, I chose there because I didn't want to say his or her, because it's just at the CAO's discretion.
That's even better. Thank you. When you say there, it almost makes it sound like the applicant gets to decide. So I just wanted to make that clear. So it's at the CAO's discretion.
At the CAO's discretion, yes.
Very good. So just so we've got things in order, Coordinator Pettibone, if you could read back the adjusted motion, please.
Certainly, Mayor Creasy, that council grant the CEO ability to override for the 2021 season the City of Lacombe bylaw 400 development permitting process for outdoor patios at the CAO's discretion, and that any approvals are only applicable for 2021.
Thank you very much. And although it's not necessary that it is included in the motion, I think that as long as we all understand it here, that specifically refers to both private lands and public property other than roadways.
Yes. Sure, yeah.
Anything contemplated in bylaw 400, yes.
Very good. Did I see a hand up over here somewhere? Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I guess I'm just so curious, how much will this speed up the process? So Red Deer was kind of announcing that within 3 weeks, businesses can get a patio of sorts put out there. Was our process that much longer than 3 weeks? Or I'm applying that date or that time to us, but what's the timeline? What can a business expect?
So given that by the mere fact of this motion, we're giving the flexibility, I would expect that there will be instances that are perhaps easier and more clear-cut when the decision may be extremely short, would be the only way I would put it, perhaps down to days as opposed to weeks. But that's kind of what we're doing here, is eliminating the need for the normal due process, which not always, but could include NPC and that kind of thing. So we're bypassing that and giving the CAO the ability to yay or nay. I'm not going to say on the spot because it's not like it's the only thing on the table in that office, but far more immediate direction. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's right. The big thing would be appeal periods. And so when you have your normal process involves an appeal period, that's going to lengthen the process significantly by a few weeks right there. And so the mayor's correct. There are likely some situations, I know, in fact, where there are some situations where we're already well aware of what they want to do and we'll be able to give them approval tomorrow morning.
So let's keep in mind, I don't think that this includes building permits. This is merely the ability to facilitate them putting in a patio on the properties that we've outlined earlier. So a little difference there, and why the timing can in fact be boosted up. It's not like we're bypassing the MGA or the building standards here. It's Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So in essence, the private parking lot restaurants, for example, say Toller's out at Petchican or Lido's, where their parking lot in front of their building is actually private property. They, in essence, could make that their whole parking lot that's private property a patio.
Well, they couldn't, but they could certainly get approval from the CAO
right.
in that regard.
That's my point, but that's private property, so they have more flexibility.
Correct, but under the existing bylaw, if they were to make an application, and I don't know the details well enough of that development, but I'm assuming that the parking is near the limit of what they required. And so if they were to take up 3 or 4 spots, that would likely put them below the required number of parking. And so normally they'd have to come to MBC to request a variance, and then it'd be appealable. And so there is a lot of additional, what some people would call red tape, but what others would call due process. You know, depends which side you are on there. Here, we're saying they're going to come to me and say, I'd like to take up 3 or 4 spots in the parking lot. Is that okay? And we're going to say, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then there may be complaints, and that business owner and the building owner will field the complaints. So it actually, I'm not highly concerned about those kinds of situations. I think it'll be more when you are taking on-street parking that other businesses will rely on.
Councilor Gullickson.
Thank you. Will all permits, they all say temporary on them? For that?
I will have to think about exactly how we're going to document it. I'm not sure that I would want to issue a permit under the bylaw 400 just because it is a bunch of variances from that, and so it might be more of a temporary authorization, license to occupy type of thing.
Okay.
But it will be a temporary approval, whatever it is.
Good.
Anyone else? Who read the last motion, or who wrote the last motion in? Councilor Hibbs, does anyone need it read back? We're all good on the private spaces and public lands other than roadways portion of this initiative? Very good. Seeing none, I will call the question then. All those in favor? And I see none opposed. So it's unanimous. Thank you. All right, move on to section 6, the information items. Chief Gotti, did you have an administrative report for us?
I believe I did. Yes, I did. So this, at the time of writing the report, there's 43 active community cases at the time of writing. I understand from Todd there is 51, the most recent update. We are not recommending the declaration of a state of local emergency. Our city facilities are open for select activities that continue to be permitted. One thing of interest that I thought when I was talking with Todd is that if you recall back to sort of what I'll call the first wave, at that time, you were declared as an outbreak community if you had more than 50 per 100,000 cases, and we've now crossed 50 for 14,000. So it's certainly not a celebratory moment in terms of Lacomb's performance here. I would say up until now, we've been fortunate to be well below the provincial average and certainly the national average, but if you look at our case count right now, there's nothing to be proud of there. So I hope that people will continue to be vigilant or even enhance their vigilance within the community to try and drive those numbers the other way. Because much as we try to do what we can for the businesses and supporting restaurants like we just have, nothing will correct that until we are able to get back to normalcy province-wide and community-wide. Administratively, we have actually finalized the recruitment of a senior manager of finance, so I'll provide an update this week about that. We are continuing to deal with the typical spring issues, and actually street sweeping is well underway in terms of meter replacements. We've now completed, I believe, 260 of the 340 meters that have been identified initially for replacement. So we're well on our way to replacing those. And we have been testing some of the failed ones, although there's a back, we can't test them as fast as they're being replaced, but we are testing. Audits have been complete for the city and its related agencies, financial audits, I should say. And those will come to you at your next council meeting. The disaster recovery program appeal for the 76th Street road failure has been rejected by the Minister of Transportation. They reported rainfall does not meet the threshold for what they consider a disaster. I have to say, much as the message greatly frustrated me, the province did a great job of providing all of their background data, right down to the hydrologic reports and models that they used to rely on this rejection. And so they really left me no avenue of further appeal there. But it was great to have the rationale for the decision. Unfortunately, ATCO has reduced their franchise fee revenue for 2021, their prediction, because they have reduced their expectation of revenue themselves. So correspondingly, we also reduce our revenue.
And did they give any explanations of why that would be an expectation?
Yes, they have put off capitalizing some of the investments that they had initially intended to make to provide rate stabilization for their customers. So those investments will happen in a future year, and the revenue will increase correspondingly. Because of course, the ability for them to charge is based on their investment. So when you see electric and gas companies making investments, that's investments you'll get to pay back in your rates later. And when they hold off like this, there is a savings for residents, which is great. It does trickle down to a reduction in revenue for the city.
Can I speak? Also, warm weather can affect the amount of revenue from the gas side.
Yeah, and I think that the COVID offices versus working from home could have some impact, although I would have actually thought that would increase it. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Chief Gowdy? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I was curious why this letter couldn't be made public. Is that a fair question to say in the open meeting? Regarding the road?
So normally it would, and I had, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, Chief Gowdy.
Normally it would. I had initially had it in the public document, but it was sent as protected Class A. It was sent as a protected Class A document from the ministry, and so for whatever reason, they have deemed it to be not for public consumption, which was odd as well.
Well, it may be odd. I mean, certainly within their purview to do so. I did like the fact that you recognize that you appreciate the rationale in the decision, albeit it's not an outcome that we would have liked. If you're satisfied with the rationale that was given for it, that makes me a little more at ease. Doesn't help financially, but the process was certainly there anyway. And if there was nothing else there, then the council mailbox, we have one in-camera letter. And from the Alberta Public Works Association, there's a letter from the National Public Works outlining Public Works Week, and we're certainly always appreciate an opportunity to recognize the fine work that our Public Works crew does for the city, and to have it have them recognized nationally with that association is great to see. I realize it's a little difficult for them to have normal, I don't want to call it hype, but the normal celebration that they do and the events that kind of correspond with this week. Excuse me. But certainly I hope they appreciate the fact that council recognizes them and the important work that they do for the city. We'll send on our best. Thank you. Before I forget, you had mentioned that you had secured an individual for the financial services manager position. Yes. Was there any other staff appointments that you wanted to mention, or not at this time? Planning and development, everything, or no? Very good. Okay.
Where you ask me makes me think they're probably.
Hired the person there.
Well, she's. So she has been promoted to administrative assistant in the public for the operations and planning division.
And her replacement?
And her replacement. We don't know. So we have hired a planning assistant, planning technician, I believe, because of an internal promotion into a different position from an internal promotion. Normally I don't announce each one, but yes, we have a new member in planning and development, and I think they're going to be a great addition. I hope that you hear great things out in the community.
Forgive me for putting you on the spot for that. But you know what? I think that council has shown that it's an important area, and the work that's been put into it to communicate with our builders and individuals who choose to come into City Hall and want information about building permits and developing in our community is important. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't overlooked. So once again, I wasn't necessarily trying to test your pitch in the spot, but thank you for mentioning it. Okay, then we have a letter 6.2.c from the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission regarding RD Mug and the Red Deer Municipal Users Group, and a letter encouraging that we reconsider our earlier decision and become a a member of this organization. And certainly that is something that any councillor is able to bring forward. I happen to chair that Water Services Commission, and the letter went out to all of the municipalities that are not currently members within that within the area that users group serves. Anything that you'd like to add on that item, Chief Cody?
Just, I guess, as a point of information, if council is interested in participating, the cost is around $2,700, and it would be something you could consider at your annual operating budget adoption.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was curious, I could not remember why we chose not to be.
Well, I think there was quite a number of reasons, but I mean, without background information available right now, I don't know that it would necessarily be appropriate. We can discuss them at budget time if I think that would maybe be more appropriate. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
You just don't have the information to back it up no matter what's said here today, so. We'll move along then to the commission's board's minutes. And we've got the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission minutes from November 9th. Any questions there? Councillor Hoekstra?
Here we go. There's a motion on the second page that you're elected chair until November 8th, 2020. I'm guessing that was supposed to be 2021.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that wasn't the date of the appointment, to be honest with you.
The meeting was November 9th, 2020, and you were elected chair to be your term expiring November 8th, 2020. It's just
that is
piddly, but
no,
I'm guessing you're supposed to be till 2021.
That's not piddly at all, and I'm actually surprised. You got me wondering now if the month is wrong or the month in here, or additionally, because it's after election time. So yeah, in any event, I think it's safe to assume that date is not correct.
Right.
And it kind of shocks me how many people that's went through to come to this point before you notice. So thank you for that. We appreciate it and see that that's certainly corrected. Anything additional on the Water Services Commission? After that, naturally corresponding the same date was the Wastewater Services Commission meeting. Anything there? And Lacombe Regional Airport Committee meeting from December 19th, going back a few months there. Anything that you care to bring up, Councillor Ross?
Just that I think construction was supposed to start June 7th for the rebuilding of the runway. Obviously, you got that's a very significant provincial grant, and just reviewing the strategic plan, and with the rebuilding of Brownstone Avenue, it's opening up opportunities for further utilities within the hangars and further opportunities for the whole airport. So that was quite significant last year as well.
Nice, thank you. And the Art Collection Committee meeting minutes from January 12th. Any hands there? North Red Deer River Water Services again, meeting minutes from February 1st, a little more current there. Hopefully those dates are correct. Any questions? No? The Municipal Planning Commission meeting minutes from February 3rd. And the Lacombe Police Commission minutes from February 18th. Any concerns with those minutes? And then a meeting from March for the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission once again. There's been some changes there with our administration and clerical on those two boards, so I think you'll see that this was kind of a catch-up time for minutes there, and they'll certainly become more regular as we move forward. Who'd like to start with councillor reports? Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My report is there. I had 3 different meetings. MPC on this March 17th, library on March 23rd, and April 1st on the central zone conversation regarding COVID, and I felt that that was kind of a waste of my time. I mean, you could have got all that information daily from the information from the daily updates, so really there wasn't anything new there. I was hoping there would be, and there wasn't. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Not at this time, thank you.
Councillor Hoekstra? Councillor Konik, anything you'd care to report? Thank you. Councillor Jacobson? And Councillor Hibbs?
Nothing, thank you.
Very good. Over the last few weeks, actually had a few meetings with AHS that was unfortunate. I think that in future, I expect they will have their topics addressed a little more appropriately than merely a regurgitation of information that's already available. I think that the number of participants on there, while it shows interest, I think that the mood would suggest that they were less than impressed with the format, and the information was not specific to the area. Quite frankly, I don't think that municipal elected officials need a rally session as much as that's what that amounted to. And should they choose to do those types of mass events in the future, they might want to limit them to those individuals in a given area and address questions rather than merely giving us company line notes. That's as polite as I can be about that meeting. We did have a meeting with MP Calkins, myself, and Chief Gowdy at the end of last week. It was certainly interesting and informative. It was a relatively informal meeting, talking about a variety of events, both federal and more immediate and close to home as well. And certainly the opportunity was given to council if there's any burning questions for our representative in Ottawa. And is there anything that you would like to add about that meeting?
No, I thought it was very interesting, and he had a number of predictions for the budget that's coming up here on the 19th, which I will look forward to seeing whether they are accurate or not.
Absolutely. And I think some additional items of note with the opening of our or another business at the west area, which was certainly great to see. I had an opportunity to go out there and meet with the developer and some of his team were there, as well as some franchise individuals from British Columbia, helping them get off to a good start. I was certainly impressed with the organization and wish them the best. Line plans for some additional features that I certainly look forward to. And I've had lots of people inquire as to when that area will become city property, so to speak, and certainly the process in place, and the street scenario there will be turned over later on this year, I understand, or just a portion of thereof.
I would have to check it out.
Okay.
Again, I apologize. If I had said later on this year, then I'm confident it's still later on this year, but I don't have it right on my.
It's twice tonight that I've put you on the spot. Keep on your toes, right? We also have a meeting coming up with the Governor General later on this week, so look forward to what she has to say. That's really all that I have.
Governor General?
Lieutenant Governor, my apologies.
Okay, I was gonna.
Thank you.
Really? Governor General, that's good.
How did you do that?
My mistake. Was there anything that anybody wanted to add that would be of interest to our community this time? No? I think that's all that was for the information portion of the agenda. So if we could have a motion. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council receive all reports and correspondence as information.
I like that way better. Thank you for the wording. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. And we have our minutes before us from March 22nd from the regular meeting of council. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those? Councillor Hoekstra?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Anybody have any revisions or anything that was missing on there that needs to be included? Very well. All those in favor? Thank you. And next up, we have a notice of motion from Councillor Ross, item 8.1, to direct, actually, Councillor Ross, I'll let you read it.
Thank you. Motion 8.1 is to direct administration to provide other options to accomplish strategic objective 4.5.3C, review safe speed limits in the community using internal resources. I feel that this is on our strategic plan, and I feel that obviously as discussed, I agree that it's a tremendous cost to the consultants, but I think there are several departments within the city, the administration with the Lacombe Police Service bylaw or in the administration or in planning and development, that I think there's some useful information that could be brought back to council.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. So as with all our directives, I think we want administration to be successful on our behalf. Is this just a blanket statement for the entire community, or is there some specific areas where we could perhaps focus their energies to try and come up with outcomes that we're after without having them invest?
I think within our agencies within the city, I think the Lacombe Police Service would identify some areas that they've expressed to me that could be addressed, and that for safety reasons, or as the community has grown or the traffic impact has affected specific areas, I think they would be a great asset. And bylaw and planning development, I think in time changes and volume changes and so forth, that I think there's updates that could be addressed, I guess.
So, but not specific areas.
Not specific. It's just
very good. That's just a notice for this evening, huh?
No, it was a notice at the last.
Thank you.
Meeting, and so you will vote this evening. And so I guess if I could just.
Certainly, Chief Cuddy.
So I do want to reiterate some comments that I made when we debated the consultant-led process, not we, I'm sorry, the council debated the consultant-led process. That administratively, we are happy to look at changes that will not result in increased frequency or severity of accidents. So those being primarily lowered speed limits. Those are very simple to do. It's the increasing in speed limits in specific areas where you are going to need legally the sign off of a competent transportation engineer. And so there, it's a little bit more of a process. And that's not to say we can't develop some internal process to do that. We absolutely can. It's just that those two paths are very different. If it is, for example, I know Lacombe Police Service has brought a concern to us about the placement of one of the speed transition zones. And they'd like to see that transition to a higher speed moved further to the edge of town, just for an enforcement standpoint. That's actually it's a very easy one for us to do, and we're working with them to process that. If it is lowering of speeds within residential areas, I guess I don't want to say that that's a simple thing, because communities that have done it have gone through extensive public consultation processes, and I think you probably should look at something like that. But from an engineering standpoint, it's a very simple thing. We just look at the signage, and so I guess I just want council to be aware that there is really two different processes for an internal review of speed limits. If it is a desire for a lowering and safety oriented, I think we can handle that administratively with our existing capacity. If it's increased, we will need to add some expertise through training or mentoring or something for a speed assessment to increase the speed.
Or for example, if you were to standardize playground and school zones to one specific time across the city, that would be an example as well.
Yes, that would be an example as well.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I'm curious, this was not on city staff's docket, if you will. Before this, how are they going to find the time to do this? If this wasn't typically what you would have been doing? Or is it appropriate, or are you able to find the time to do this?
Chief Cody?
Yes, we are. If it's a council priority, we can do it within the time frame that you direct. If there is no time limit, then it'll work into the workflow, and we'll develop that capacity over time. If it's right now, I think in your strategic plan, it's identified as a low priority item. If that is moved to a high priority item, then we would take that to be an indication that it should be done before council term ends, and we would make that.
Councillor Jacobson?
I know it wasn't me, so I'm curious, trying to remember who proposed this as part of our strategic plan objective, like which councillor, because I'd like to hear what the reasoning was behind it back 4 years ago. Because I would like to get a clear understanding and refresh my memory as to why this was a strategic objective 4 years ago, and if in fact those impetuses still remain right now. So I'm asking who did.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I know it wasn't me. That's I'm trying to.
See,
trying to figure out why we're doing this back 4 years ago.
Who it was, but somebody may have some reasons as to why this was put forward. If that'll help, Councillor Gulch, go ahead.
Thank you. I would have supported this on the lowering of the speed limit to 40 in our residential areas, especially we have some areas, Hearthstone is a prime example, that 50 is insane to drive in Hearthstone. You can't do it or shouldn't do it. And there's the odd people that do it, but it should be 40, and I feel all our residential areas should be 40. I think originally this was probably brought forward for the speed limits on the highway, which I'm not sure we can change them too much because of the angles of the streets and so on to increase speed, and I think that's what it was originally brought forward for. But I would be in support of lowering speed limits in our residential areas.
Okay. In addition to that, there was one item, somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it might have been in the Wolf Creek industrial area where there's different speed limits, one heading south, one heading north, which on the surface seems odd. Perhaps there might be some engineering reasons why that is, but it's still, I expect it's a very difficult thing for enforcement, and that's a very odd thing, in my opinion, to have two different speed limits on the same piece of roadway just simply because of direction. But that was one other one that I think was brought forward.
I think I may have been the culprit on that one, because prior to this term of council, there was a traffic committee, so there was
a lot of information available at that time that was presented to us by the police service and by bylaw of areas of concern that were brought forward. So I probably carried that forward.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I'm a little confused. I know we decided that we weren't going to go down this road in terms of a comprehensive traffic study. To me, this is kind of a backdoor, so we didn't get it that way, so we'll try and do it this way and throw it on administration's lap. I won't support the motion. I think the speed limits as they are in the city today are fine. If there's one little things that the police service want to do, and for example, moving that transition dome at Woodland Drive and 2A, that's one thing, but to do it, to drop the speed limit to 40, that's a comprehensive undertaking that needs to be looked at in the scope of a study. So if we're not doing the study, I think it's a little unfair to say to administration, okay, we're not prepared to spend that money, but you better do it now. I won't support it. I think the speed limits we have in the community are fine right now. It's too all encompassing right now. So I won't support it as it's written.
Councillor Jacobson?
Wow, Councillor Connick's making me think. But yeah, I suppose I'm uncomfortable with the motion as it's written too. I guess the reason I had asked my previous question was to get an idea, but then with Councillor Gullickson's explanation of his reason being excessive speed zones in residential areas, I guess I would potentially support a motion that was something very specific like that gave administration a very clear, this is what we're doing, please look at this, bring it back for you to discuss kind of thing. And even then, I don't know. But yeah, I'd be more amenable to supporting that than it's just a sort of broad, go do it kind of thing, right? I think for the points that have been made, it's much too onerous of an administrative burden, especially again, given there's an election coming soon. You can try to crunch it all in under 6 months under these weird circumstances as it is. The priority may change in that 6 months. So yeah. So if the motion were changed to something very specific like that, I would consider supporting it. But as it is, I wouldn't support it.
And Councillor Connick, did you have your hand up again, or did I misinterpret something? Okay, very good. So likewise, certainly a good meaning intent. That's why I specifically asked if there was an area that you had in mind. And for the same reasons, I just find it a little difficult to support this when we said no to the plan a short time ago. In saying that, this does not preclude anyone from bringing forward a specific area should this fail to receive endorsement this evening. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I look at it as an opportunity to bring up specific things like go down Wolf Creek. It's ridiculous. There's 2 speed limits in 2 different directions. Or there's been feedback in the public, why not to make playground zones, school zones, one specific time frame, whether it be 7 in the morning till 9 at night, all of them across the city. Keep it simple. I think there's several different areas that could be brought forward that, yeah, there might be, say, 10 items, and maybe council looks at it, receives the information, and hey, there's 3 or 4 that make sense that are simple to administer that could make changes. Like even with police service, the distances of certain speeds, like when you go through town, you can change speed limits probably 8 times before you go from one end to the other. And I don't know, but I think it's pretty simple to have the main people that are enforcing or planning a development that, there is some very identifiable specific areas that could be. I think then 8 or 10 areas could be brought forward that maybe could be easily changed without a study or identified and make common sense. Because I think citizens would appreciate some areas to be simplified. That was my intent, because there are areas that really don't make sense. Just like Councillor Gullickson runs forward 40 clicks. Well, somebody could go through with 50 And it's really would be very hazardous. But at 40, at least if they went through 50, it's justifiable for a ticket. At 50, it's not. That's supposed to speed down. You know, there's lots of, you know, so are there some areas of concerns of safety? Yes. Are there some areas that really don't make sense? Absolutely. And that's all I'm trying to bring forward, that, you know, I think it would be, I guess, to recognize, to address it. So.
Certainly fair comments. I think that we've had a lot of input tonight that would suggest the destination's the same. It's just a little bit of a difference in opinion how to get there. And I kind of struggle with turning the administration loose on replacing a rather comprehensive study and expecting us to be able to garner enough information to make appropriate changes, when myself, I would be happier if there was specific things brought forward to task them with that. Quite frankly, I think we can expect better results from, rather than a all-encompassing one. But we'll see. Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would hope that our traffic officer could sit down and write down a list in about 10 minutes of areas that are concerned and say, these are areas in our community that need to be addressed as far as speed, controls, and adjustments to speed limits. So Wolf Creek Drive, prime example. I just can't see this being a lot of work in that form to bring back the information you're looking for. And those are the people, he's out there every day, and between him and the other officers, I would think at a short little meeting, they should be able to know all of the trouble areas in our community better than we do. And bring it back to us as this is what they would like to see, because they're the ones out there enforcing it.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I wasn't really going to weigh in because I thought I kind of said my piece the last time we talked about this, but I do want to just reiterate the fact that this was a low priority issue. Things like this will take public consultation, and you'll have to jam that into a very short period of time, probably, if you want this to happen before the next election, because it is an election year. And honestly, if this is something that the LPS feels very strongly about, nothing precludes them from the other direction. If they bring it to administration or bring it to council, they don't need our direction to do that. They don't need administration to tell them to do that. So if it is truly an area of concern, then the commission or the police service will, I'm sure, will forward that information on. And I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't really a high priority for them right now. And nor probably should it be, because there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world right now. So I guess those are my thoughts on it. I understand the intent behind this, but it is so open-ended, and it just the timing is just not ideal. It's the exact same reason I gave the last time. So I think it does need to be ideally more community-driven. I'm not necessarily seeing that in this case. The survey that was done that Councillor Ross referenced is 5 years old now, and it wasn't conclusive in the first place. So again, I just think that this is best left alone for the time being. And then, yeah, that's all I have to say about it.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I want to echo Councillor Hibbs' thoughts as well. I agree that the important part of this is that public consultation. I think it's a little dangerous for 7 people to decide that this street needs to be 40 kilometers and this one over here needs to be 40, and that when you're talking about this type of thing, there's a lot of review that has to take place, not only with the public, but admin. And I just find it really, yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Hibbs. I think it's just not the right time for this right now. And it's not as simple as people think. I mean, just because you think this street should be 40, I don't think it should be 40, right? And so the 7 of us are going to kind of decide, I won't support it.
Anyone else?
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Sorry about that. How did you change the speed limit to 30 downtown then? Did you do that by a motion of council?
I think that Councillor Connick may want to comment on that. The floor is yours, Councillor Connick.
Yeah, so again, that didn't happen overnight either. That took some time. There was a notice of motion brought forward. It was, again, very specific, as we alluded to. And that went through consultation with the police service. It went through consultation with the downtown business community. There was a lot more involved there than simply suggesting, you know, it. Again, there was a lot of work involved there. It wasn't something that happened just overnight.
So it has to start somewhere, though. And I think that's Councillor Ross's point. I'm sorry for putting words in your mouth.
No,
is that maybe this could be the start of the type of consultation, because there needs to be a change now downtown, because the 30 extends too far to the west. It goes past the school that is no longer a school. So do we make that decision, or who makes that decision?
Chief Cody.
So in 2013 was the original reduction of the speed limit. At that time, it was brought in for a one-year pilot project, and I believe at the one-year expiration of the pilot program, when it was made permanent after there had been comment from the Lacombe Police Service and some of the downtown businesses, you are correct. It was a comment specifically from the outreach school at the time. I would say that led to council extending that 30-kilometer-an-hour zone, the downtown zone, if you will, past 53rd or to 53rd, or whatever it is now. So that was made by motion. That is a specific motion of council, was to extend it to that. I don't know if it's to 53rd or past 53rd, but right in that range. And so we would look for a specific council motion if that was to be altered.
Someone has a burning desire to comment. Once again, the motion was to direct administration to provide other options to accomplish strategic objective 4.5.3C, safe speed limits in the community using internal resources. I see no hands, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillors Gullickson and Ross, thank you. Those opposed? Councillors Hoekstra, Connick, Jacobson, Hibbs, and Creasy. So given that that motion was unsuccessful, I don't want it to be misconstrued that somehow we're not interested in a safe community. I just think that it's my hope that there are alternate motions that will come forward over time that will accomplish many of the goals that were very well reasoned and behind this being brought forward, Councillor Ross. So the work will continue. Given that, item 8.2, do you care to proceed?
Direct administration to implement no parking zones adjacent to the Canada Post community mailbox locations identified in the letter from Mrs. Kimberly Sawyer, included in request for information number 371. Also, there was photos taken and provided to council this week on their behalf. In conversation with Kimberly Sawyer at the time of, I was personally changing my mail address. The conversation was brought up that they have some areas that were they consider to be a high risk to the safety of the postal carriers, and would sincerely appreciate if some action could be taken. I asked them to identify the areas that was brought forward to her as Kimberly Sawyer, as supervisor of Lacombe Canada Post. And as the picture is indicated, there are several locations that are in high traffic area or poor visibility, or the mail carrier does not have access to have their vehicle immediately adjacent to the mailboxes. And so, yes, there are many, many locations across the city, but they identified 12 that they would appreciate to be a no parking zone so that the mail carriers are safe and that they can have their vehicles and have access to the mailboxes. So it is purely brought forward by Canada Post as a safety measure for the Lacombe mail carriers for the city of Lacombe.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Just for clarity, the photos were intended to demonstrate that there are people that park in front of mailboxes and just leave their vehicle there?
Yes. Therefore limiting access, and the carrier has to park, at which they are now at times several mailboxes at some specific locations that are quite large. So, and then they are having to park beside that vehicle, as there are continuous parked vehicles along that same street. So, for example, there was one immediately by Councillor Hoekstra's, and they were identified as one of the higher priority areas for concerns of safety.
And once again, for clarification, so to implement no parking zones, that's not, this is no parking for everyone else?
Yes.
Other than Canada Post?
Well, absolutely, because so they have access. Well, it obviously would be, because they would need access for the time of drop off of the mail into the boxes every day. Perhaps CO Gowdy would comment.
Chief Gowdy, go ahead.
So I think that maybe what you would want to look at is some sort of time limited parking rather than no parking. Because the situations you have described are ones in which the mail carriers are violating the law. They're not permitted to double park. They're not permitted to park in no parking zones. Canada Post actually got just over $1 million of parking fines last year. So this is an issue for them nationally. I think if
you're time specific, it would be like, say, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
I think you would just say loading zone only or something. 5 minutes only or 15 minutes only. That way people could still stop and get their mail, but also the mail carriers could stop and access the mailbox. Is what I think would accomplish what you wanted.
And that was the reason why I asked that, because no parking, I wasn't sure what the intent was there. So
exactly,
that's fine. I guess I struggle with the idea that obviously these are in busy areas, otherwise this issue wouldn't come up. So to remove another parking spot for 23 hours and 50 minutes a day, or whatever long it takes to enter the mailbox seems, it might be a solution for that portion, but I'm afraid it will create other congestion.
Or something specific to loading, where the individual that picks up their mail should pick up their mail and leave. For example, not use that as a parking stall for them to park their vehicle and leave their vehicle indefinitely. So,
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess you've already expressed a bit. For 15 minutes of use and 24 hours or 23 and 3/4 hours that no one else can park there is quite a request, especially because my mailbox is one of these issues, places of issue, and the neighborhood needs those parking spots. And I struggle with this request very, very much. I would like to go back to Canada Post, that they find alternative places for the mailboxes that serves us all. Unfortunately, the one in Bruns, they moved it from a place that they could park at virtually 11 months of the year. And it got moved because of their request. So, because there was ice would sort of form in front of it for 2 weeks of the year. And then it got moved now to a crazy spot. We all know it as a neighborhood that it's a crazy spot. But I would not endorse putting no parking in front of there, because the houses right across the street need that area to park. They need it. That's what happens in neighborhoods. And it would just become a nice no parking zone that everybody would park in, and then it just becomes this administrative nightmare. So I can't support this.
Councillor Gulletson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I have an issue with the two. I can't see why they can't carry 50 pieces of mail that would go into that box 80 feet from the corner, where they could park. it's really not a big deal. Have a bag, put the mail in the bag, carry it to the box and put it in. I was going to say that mailbox was moved and another location in town where there was ice. The mail delivery, they refused to deliver there because there was ice. I think it's almost their responsibility to wear the proper footwear or to at least even put down their own sand, whatever it is, to make their area safe. And in that case, they didn't even tell the residents that they weren't delivering. Everybody just kept going there and checking their mailbox on the ice, and there was no mail. So I have a real issue with this. I think if they can't walk 100 feet with mail, I don't understand it.
Councillor Ross?
I think the whole the Canada Post is delivery is obviously it's changed towards a tremendous amount of parcels compared to previous years. So it's not quite as simple as carrying the old-fashioned bag of mail, right? I don't know, and like as CEO Gowdy brought forth, would a loading zone accommodate to, promote maybe some education that this is to be a come and go spot, so that there is access to it, because everybody in that spot, most mail spots are going to stop and get their mail. So to be in essence, really that parking spot is really needed by pretty much everybody that has mail there, right? Or some people walk, some people choose not to. I'm just saying that it's an option, right? And I don't know if the loading zone does accommodate both, and that as a loading zone, it would kind of educate people that, hey, this is, much appreciated for safety and convenience to the mail carriers, right?
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I too struggle with this a little bit. Parking is at a premium in a lot of subdivisions, and I certainly would support the idea of a no parking zone. I guess I'm wondering too, I don't believe Kimberly Sawyer is the postmaster for the city of Lacombe, so I'm just wondering where this request is being driven or where it's coming from. Is it just a disgruntled letter carrier? Like, I guess I'm just looking for clarification there too. But my wife was a letter carrier for many years, and I have all due respect, immense respect for the men and women who do this. It's especially in the winter, it's not a fun job. But that being said, a lot of the parcels now, they're delivered right to the door. There's very few parcels that actually go into the box. And I think it's really hard to put down a specific time too. I mean, in Christmas time when they're busy, they may not get to the mailbox till 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just because of sheer volume. So it's very hard to identify a specific time as well to say, oh, it's going to happen between 8 a.m. and noon. That's always not necessarily the case, especially if you've got people right now. There are a lot of letter carriers that are down with illness or whatever. So you've got guys doing 2 or 3 routes, and they may not get to the place until 8 p.m. So I struggle with this one as well. I'm not sure this is the route that we should be looking at. Thank you.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure. So I appreciate the fact, Councillor Rossi, you're clearly representing the wishes of a constituent here, and that's obviously the right thing to do. But I guess I see this as just a potential big headache for whoever takes complaints downtown here, because again, from a homeowner or neighborhood living perspective, again, who has more of a, I hate to use the word, social license to use parking in the neighborhood? Is it the people who live there all the time, or someone who's delivering mail? And obviously, this is only this is only going to be needed, as Councillor Gullickson said, in very busy neighborhoods. So how do you think that person who parked in front of a 15-minute zone because there was no other parking available, and gets their first ticket is going to feel coming downtown to talk about that, right? I would have a very difficult time looking that person in the eye and say, the mail carrier has more right to that parking space than you do in your neighborhood. And I actually wouldn't say that. I'd say that's a stupid law. Pardon me. That's an unjust law. So, so for that case, I wouldn't support this.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I have a question regarding who's paying for the signage. Like, would Canada Post pay for all the signage that would go up? Or would they be expecting the city to pay for that?
I purely brought this forward as the
I don't think you were
supervisor.
expected to answer that question.
No, I'm not expecting, I purely brought this forward as a safety concern that was brought forward by the letter carriers to their supervisor, Kimberly Sawyer. So I'm advocating on behalf of the concern that was brought forward to me. And they have a concern about their safety when their vehicles has to be put out into the street, or visibility that they've had close calls reported to them. And so this is a concern that's brought forward that would appreciated some, that their safety is, addressed, so.
Chief Gotti, was there an indication that Canada Post would potentially be involved with covering the costs associated with this proposal?
So I haven't received any such indication, but I haven't asked them either. To use a comparable situation, I would point to recently released R5405 maybe, that was about the Family Medical Association or building wanting a handicap parking spot. They were required to pay for that signage. And so I think you could make the case that the Canada Post should be looked to compensate the city for this.
Anyone else? So for the motion to direct administration to implement no parking zones adjacent to the Canada Post community mailbox locations identified in the letter described as from Ms. Kimberly Sawyer and included in the request for information number 371. All those in favor? Those opposed? That is defeated.
I'm over to.
Okay. We're listing for next meetings. Monday, April 26th.
You probably haven't seen, but I did forward a notice of motion that I received in writing at this meeting from Councillor Hoekstra. And so now would be the appropriate time to read that notice of motion into the record. Of course, not to debate this evening, but at a future meeting.
Very good. Thank you for that notice.
And I can read it if you don't have it that close at hand.
I do not have it that close at hand, so please go ahead and read it into the record.
Thank you. So I received a notice of motion as per bylaw 370, section 10 and 11. Notice of motion can be submitted at a council meeting itself. And I have received such a notice of motion from Councillor Hoekstra. The motion is, I move that council directs administration to approach Lacoma District FCSS to complete phase 2 of the social master plan for the city of Lacoma. This motion will be debated at the April 26th, 2021 council meeting, unless council directs an alternate date for that discussion.
Thank you. Any questions as opposed to discussion of that notice of motion? Seeing none, then we'll move on to next meetings. April 26th is our regular council meeting at 5 p.m. Followed by Monday, May 3rd at 5 p.m. That is the council committee meeting.
6 p.m. actually.
That was changed. My notes were not. Thank you very much. That is the one that was changed to 6 p.m. as have been a few of our council meetings, or committee meetings rather. The next two are regular council meetings, both at 5 p.m. for May 10th. And then on Tuesday, because of the holiday Monday, on Tuesday, May 25th. That's all we have noted coming up. I think that concludes our regular business and brings us to in-camera items. I don't think we're behind on any motions at this point in time. Waiting on in-camera. Councillor Hoekstra.
Move that we move in camera.
Thank you very much.